Pokémon, medicine and martial arts. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author, we are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 701, Choice. The group of thugs on the cross-sea bridge were chattering, each one gazing at Yu like a wolf at a little white rabbit. It was clear from their expressions that they subconsciously dismissed Yu as someone insignificant, or perhaps even non-threatening. Since so many of you want to see a brawl, then let's just have it. Without hesitation, Agao pulled a Pokeball from his waist and prepared to send out his Pokemon for the first battle. However, just as he raised his hand, he was immediately grabbed by a girl named Eiji. You're the boss among us, so you should be the last one to fight. I'll go first this time, since I'm itching to do it myself. Eiji, alright, since you want to go, I'll let you go. After the initial surprise, Agao smiled in relief and moved himself and his car back, making room. I didn't expect a girl to fight me first. It's a bit surprising, but come to think of it, what kind of powerful character can come out of a gang like yours? Yu wore a disdainful smile, looking down on female trainers. A female trainer named Eiji, upon hearing Yu's words, immediately revealed a look of rage. Don't look down on girls. You think you're so powerful? Who do you think you are? Let's have a showdown, Eiji shouted in rage, sending out her Pokemon. Mean Xiao, come out and fight. Just like the decoration on the bicycle Eiji had said, the Pokemon he sent out was also a Mean Xiao. It's a Mean Xiao? Yu was surprised to see this little-looking woman actually release a Mean Xiao. After all, Mean Xiao is known as the most beautiful thing, and that's not just an exaggeration. Therefore, its rarity is understandable. Even Melodic's original form, Squidward, isn't a particularly easy Pokemon to encounter. However, while Melodic is extremely rare, that doesn't necessarily mean others don't exist. Yu already has one right next to him. Therefore, after his initial surprise, Yu quickly calmed down, his expression turning somewhat serious. The Melodic sent by the girl named Eiji had clearly reached the level of a quasi-king. However, judging by its somewhat unstable aura, it must have only recently achieved a breakthrough. Under normal circumstances, encountering an opponent of this caliber would likely have Yu excited for a moment. After all, for a battle-mad warrior, constant battles are paramount. Only through constant combat can one's strength grow. But now, facing this Melodic, who normally would have been excited, Yu's expression was grim. It was unavoidable. The previous morning's battle had been so exciting that he'd forgotten about it. As a result, all of his main Pokemon have lost their combat capabilities, and without treatment at the Pokemon Center, their injuries haven't fully recovered. Pikachu is the fastest to recover, but even at its best, it's only recovered 4 or 5 levels of strength. Furthermore, if it were to engage in combat, with its injuries still present, its combat effectiveness would be significantly questionable. There would likely be some discrepancies. As for the other Pokemon, Yu hadn't had time to pay attention to them due to their long journeys. Therefore, not only had he abandoned his main Pokemon, Yu now only had Snorlax, Buzzbit, and Scrabble capable of fighting. Of course, Pikachu's current condition made him barely capable. Alright, the Pokemon I sent out is Melodic. What about yours? Hurry up. We're all in a hurry, aren't you too? Eiji crossed his arms. His expression impatient. I know. Why are you rushing? I'm just thinking of a Pokemon I can use to finish you off more quickly. Yu also waved his hand impatiently. Pikachu, sitting vacantly in the basket, called out in his direction, presumably meaning to send it into battle. Even at this stage, Pikachu still looked like he hadn't fully recovered from his injuries. But as the leader of the Pokemon, how could he possibly step forward when faced with such a provocation? Pikachu, Yu hadn't expected Pikachu, already in such a dire state, to actually volunteer. Pikachu seeing the worry in his trainer's eyes, Pikachu nodded firmly, signaling for him to go. Alright, if that's the case, then Pikachu, you go ahead. If it's truly impossible, then retreat. Your life, health, and safety are more important than anything else. Not even the legendary Moltres is as important to me as you are. Yu warned with a solemn expression. Don't be fooled by his unwavering love for all Pokémon. But no one is perfect. How could anyone be without selfish motives? Rather than risking the safety of a Moltres, a creature he had no connection to, especially a legendary beast, he preferred to ensure the health and safety of his own Pokémon, even if it was just an ordinary electric mouse. Furthermore, Yu had long considered Pikachu his own family and companion. Therefore, Yu would rather see the time delayed than see Pikachu suffer any further harm, especially since it was already weak. If further illness were to occur, it would be dangerous. Pikachu. Upon receiving his trainer's response, Pikachu was clearly overjoyed. Whether the reason for his joy was his trainer's concern for him, or the prospect of being sent out into battle, only Pikachu knew. Pikachu, you have to work harder. You have to work harder on Long-tailed Fox and the others too. The three girls looked at Yu with complicated eyes at this time. They really didn't expect that Yu, who usually treated Pokémon like his own friends, would say such words at this moment. Chapter 702 Scum. The three girls looked at Yu with complicated expressions. They hadn't expected Yu, who usually treated Pokémon like his friends, to say such words. Perhaps it was the distance, or perhaps it was because Yu spoke so quietly. The surrounding gang of thugs might not have heard what Yu had just said, but Serena and the other two, who had stood alongside Yu almost the entire time, heard it clearly. At that moment, their hearts were filled with mixed feelings. Although they felt a little unbelievable, they accepted the facts. After all, as mentioned before, everyone has their own selfish desires. They weren't so noble as to be truly selfless. They simply cared about the safety of the people and Pokémon around them. That was enough, more important than anything else. Moreover, compared to Moltres, who had nearly injured them all that morning, Pikachu already had a deep bond with them. However, while understanding and accepting, Serena and the other two girls felt a renewed sense of defeat. It was a matter of strength, since the other party had clearly explained the rules for both group and individual duels. If their side truly possessed sufficient strength, they could have engaged in a group duel, similar to the enemies, with each player providing a Pokémon for a best-of-3 duel. However, their strength wasn't sufficient, and they didn't want to become a burden to Yu. While their current situation was no different from a burden, they truly didn't want to cause further trouble. While the strength of their Pokémon had greatly improved compared to their initial stage, their combat capabilities were still lacking. This was especially true for Air, the strongest of the three women. While she barely met the two aforementioned requirements, her strongest, long-tailed Firefox, also at the level of a Quasi-King, was still effectively suppressed by the water-attributed Melodic. Therefore, even with Air's limited combat capabilities, let alone her ability to fight against opposing attributes, they were unable to achieve the scene of them cheering Pikachu on. Firefox 6 Longtail. At this moment, their Pokémon also offered words of encouragement. Pikachu with a slight nod of his head, Pikachu then moved like a brave warrior heading into battle. He didn't look weak or injured at all, and leaped directly from the basket onto the small battlefield that everyone had cleared. You actually sent out a Pikachu and, relying on this electric mouse, you think you can defeat my Melodic? I think you're delusional. Ho, big sister, they're more than delusional. Don't you see this Pikachu? It's covered in scars and so skinny. It must have been abused. Judging by its frail appearance, it seems someone who abuses Pokémon frequently, indeed. I didn't expect you, besides looking unremarkable, to abuse Pokémon. We, the young racers, can't stand this. No matter what, I'm going to teach you a lesson. AG, you go first, but be gentle. Don't hurt Pikachu. The most important thing is to teach this scumbag, this scumbag, a lesson. Agao spoke up at this time, his words filled with anger, but not completely overwhelmed by it. He still maintained his original rationality, believing that no matter how magical the Pokémon was, it was innocent. Yiyu's face was full of innocence, but even more of helplessness. What the hell was going on? How had I inexplicably become a scumbag? Do I need your permission to send out any Pokémon? Besides, as a trainer, how could I possibly know the status of my Pokémon? And you actually scold me for that? While your intentions might be good, you're really meddling in unnecessary matters. Yiyu rants furiously, feeling a surge of anger. Even the most good-tempered person would likely be enraged by such insults. Besides, Yiyu himself isn't known for his good temper, otherwise, he wouldn't have achieved such a reputation in the martial arts world at such a young age. Ha, And you claim you're not a bunch of scoundrels who don't study hard. Don't you even know the attribute battle chart? Electric type counters water type, don't you understand? Finally unable to contain himself, Yu erupts, his face filled with sarcasm. So what? This still can't cover up your abuse of Pokemon. Look, the once adorable Pikachu is now practically unrecognizable from your abuse. Scarred and emaciated, gosh, how can you tell this kid is so skinny? Damn, don't you know how much money I've spent raising him just because of him? Yu couldn't help but complain in his heart, but this time, before he could finish his rant, Aji seemed to have lost her patience and didn't intend to continue with this nonsense. She planned to teach this Pokemon amusing scumbag a lesson. Although it wasn't him who was being beaten, but the poor Pokemon in front of her. But there's a saying that goes, if you hit me physically, I hurt him too. She wanted to torture this scumbag mentally and with hatred. He abused Pokemon so much on a regular basis, and now he had to endure it all the time. Mean Xiao uses water cannon. Pikachu, dodge quickly, then 100,000 volts. Although Pikachu's speed was limited by his previous injuries, even with the limitations, he still displayed remarkable speed against Mean Xiao. After successfully dodging Mean Xiao's water cannon, Pikachu had time to unleash his 100,000 volts. However, the 100,000 volts at this point were significantly weaker than at its peak, as evidenced by the lightning bolts, which were only the thickness of an arm. As expected, Pikachu, seemingly battered and malnourished, hadn't expected to dodge his water cannon with such speed. Mean Xiao, still caught off guard, had no time or opportunity to dodge the sudden 100,000 volts attack. He could only take it head-on. Chapter 703, Contrast of Skills. Just as Melodica couldn't dodge and took the 100,000 volt attack, everyone present, including AG, thought Melodica was doomed, its defeat certain. But what happened next left them stunned. After all, while Pikachu is still weak and hadn't yet recovered its peak, at its peak it was still near elite level, close to elite, and its abilities still had the same power. Therefore, seeing this overwhelming and shocking scene, everyone believed defeat was inevitable. However, after being stunned, the group of thugs present became even more furious, but most of them sneered at Yu. Although Pikachu's 100,000 volt attack had fully hit Melodica, its injuries had ultimately limited its effectiveness. Without its peak power, it could instantly kill any water-type Pokemon, including those at the same level. After all, Pikachu is the god of Pikachu, that's how powerful he is. Yet, at this moment, the 100,000 volt attack, which should have been an instant kill, felt like a full-body massage on Melodic. Melodic felt an indescribable sense of comfort, even the tingling sensation on his body making him feel good. He narrowed his eyes slightly and let out a few soft cries. What's going on? How could this happen? Why is Pikachu's 100,000 volt attack no longer effective? Even if he hasn't fully recovered from his injuries, should it be like this? At this moment, Yu wasn't the only one feeling puzzled. Even Pikachu itself was deeply puzzled. It knew its own current physical condition, otherwise it wouldn't have volunteered to lead the charge. But now, its pride and advantage, the 100,000 volt attack, seemed to have no effect. How could it possibly fight directly? If even its 10,000 volt attack was like this, then its other electric type attacks were certainly no match. The only option left was melee combat, but Pikachu's current condition made that impossible. Look at Pikachu's current state, as if a gust of wind could blow it over at any moment. But now, Melodic is at its peak. It seems you've abused Pikachu quite a bit. Your skills are so weak and powerless now, that's just as well. Let me defeat Pikachu first, and then we'll teach you a lesson later. AG finally recovered from the shock of the 100,000 volt skill, a malicious smile on his face. Mean Xiao, go ahead. Use water column tail, but be gentle. Just keep Pikachu from getting up, Tisk. Don't look down on me. Do you think you can defeat my Pikachu like that? You're so naive. Pikachu, use Lightning Ball to block it. If close combat isn't possible due to physical limitations, then use a ranged skill to block it for now. And so, Pikachu condensed and flung the seemingly powerful lightning ball out. They hoped to block Melodic's attack with their abilities, but the aforementioned reasons remained. Even though Melodic was already susceptible to electric attacks, having learned from their previous experience, they didn't even attempt to dodge or withdraw from the lightning ball. Instead, they directly countered it with their water tail and lightning ball. However, what happened next was once again a complete surprise. They expected it to be easily blocked, just like the 100,000 volts attack, merely scratching Melodic's itch. However, they were utterly surprised to find that this time, the lightning ball was no mere show. It truly embodied the full force of Pikachu. As a result, the moment the lightning ball and water tail collided, a massive explosion erupted at the intersection of the two abilities. Melodic, using the melee water tail, was the first to be caught in the brunt of the impact. Its slender body flew out in the smoke of the explosion, appearing utterly distraught. Minchao, Eiji screamed at this moment and immediately ran to Minchao's side to help it up. But before Eiji could reach Minchao and help it up, Minchao struggled to get up from the ground. However, as soon as it supported itself, it seemed to have suffered a severe blow and fell to the ground again in the next moment. Oh, I didn't expect to be so lucky this time. Not only did Pikachu's electric ball skill work, but even Minchao was paralyzed by such a coincidence. Yu also saw this, and his eyes immediately lit up. However, his words sounded so gloating to Eiji. Why is this happening? Didn't Pikachu's 100,000 volts clearly have no effect on Melodic? Yet. And logically, shouldn't 100,000 volts, an electric-type skill, be more powerful than Thunderball? Even Ego, who had been watching the entire battle, was puzzled. Logically, in Pikachu's current state, since he couldn't use 100,000 volts anymore, shouldn't Thunderball be ineffective? At this point, the group of people watching were making different assumptions. Similarly, facing this situation, Yu also made his own assumptions. Initially baffled, he finally understood after hearing Ego's words 100,000 volts was indeed more powerful than Thunderball. This was why Pikachu's two electric-type skills consumed different amounts of energy. Given Pikachu's current physical condition, unleashing the powerful 100,000 volts would be a stretch. Even if it were unleashed, it would be ineffective. This might explain why, despite seemingly having unleashed 100,000 volts, Pikachu failed to cause any significant damage to Melodic. Meanwhile, Lightning Ball, a skill with a lower energy consumption, successfully inflicted considerable damage on Melodic. Chapter 704 Paralysis. What a coincidence, Yu couldn't help but feel somewhat relieved. Fortunately, he hadn't been clinging to the 100,000 volts skill. Otherwise, the consequences would have been the same as before. Well done, Pikachu. Now that he knew the reason why Pikachu could use such a powerful electric ball, Yu finally felt more confident. After roughly estimating how much stamina Pikachu had left to use the skill, Yu silently began to calculate how long Pikachu could hold out. Very good, Pikachu, let's team up and defeat the enemy. Pika, seeing the damage his electric ball had inflicted on Melodic, Pikachu seemed to be emboldened. His fighting spirit was at an all-time high. If Pikachu hadn't been a little off at that moment, Yu would have almost thought that Pikachu had completely recovered, without even a trace of injury. Okay, if that's the case, then Pikachu should keep your distance and use Electro Ball. Yu immediately laid out the tactics in his mind. Although I'm a little surprised that your Pikachu, after being abused so badly by you, could still use such a powerful Electro Ball. Do you think that's the end? My Minchao is far more powerful than this. Eiji's eyes were solemn, and he finally recovered from his shock. Minchao uses self-recovery. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, bringing a smug smile. Then, a white light flashed from Minchao's body. This light was particularly soft. The injuries on Minchao's body, which had originally looked seriously injured by the electric shock, began to heal visibly, repairing themselves. I didn't expect this Minchao to have learned self-recovery. It seems its level is quite high, because Air also had a Minchao. Yu had some familiarity with him. So, after seeing Minchao successfully perform self-recovery, the look of relief he'd originally felt after Pikachu's lightning strike didn't show much. After all, skills like self-recovery were incredibly devastating. It was practically invincible, as long as the Pokemon that mastered it didn't get instantly killed. Of course, besides a one-hit kill, it was also possible if the skills were tightly linked, combining them so that the opponent had no time to react or recover. And at that moment, with Pikachu's current stamina, it was unlikely that Minchao would be able to kill it instantly. Furthermore, if Minchao engaged in a protracted battle with Pikachu using self-recovery, Pikachu would likely be in a very vulnerable position. But Yu didn't have time to think. After ordering Melodic to use self-recovery, Eiji followed suit, issuing another order. Perhaps due to previous experience, Melodic didn't dare use water-based attacks this time. Instead, he went for the close-range attack, Iron Tail. Mean Xiao, use Iron Tail. Normally, facing Iron Tail, Pikachu would have gladly counterattacked with Iron Tail, to see whose Iron Tail was sharper. But now, facing Iron Tail, which seemed to be able to blast the air, Pikachu could only dodge. Pikachu, dodge quickly, and then use Lightning Ball when the opportunity arises. Despite his frantic dodging, Pikachu occasionally managed to retaliate with Lightning Ball. With each shift in attack and defense, a smile finally crept into Yuyu's face. He had discovered a key that might hold the key to Pikachu's victory over Milotic. Now, Pikachu, use Lightning Ball. Seeing an opening for Mean Xiao, Yuyu decisively gave the order. As Mean Xiao revealed this flaw, it had no time to withdraw and defend itself. The Lightning Ball successfully struck Mean Xiao. In a split second, Mean Xiao was sent flying backwards in the same awkward position as before, slamming heavily to the ground. I told you it's useless. With Pikachu's current attack, it's just a tickle for Mean Xiao. Mean Xiao, use self-recover again. Ag didn't mind the old move. Seeing something was amiss, he quickly used self-recover to provide support. It all went just as Ag had envisioned. Upon receiving the command from his trainer, Mean Xiao propped himself up, radiating light and repairing his injuries. Self-recover, true to its name, was self-recovery. With speed visible to the naked eye, Mean Xiao's injuries healed instantly. This time, however, just as Milotic had recovered from its injuries and was about to charge forward to engage Pikachu once again, something unexpected happened. Milotic's movements, which should have been seamless and continuous, suddenly faltered. A scream echoed. Then, yellow arcs of electricity, like snakes, suddenly began to flash across Milotic's body. Enveloped in these pulsating arcs, Milotic was unable to move at all. What's going on? Paralysis. That's not right. This paralysis should have occurred before you used self-recovery, but doesn't self-recovery heal a Pokemon's own injuries? Why didn't the paralysis effect go away? Ag seemed particularly puzzled. However, in response to Ag's doubts, Yuyu simply curled his lips in disdain. Tisk, I told you not to be a gangster if you don't have any education. You'd better go back to school and retrain yourself. How dare you be a trainer in your current state? What did you say? Isn't that right? Shouldn't self-recovery be able to recover everything? After all, no matter how serious the injury of the Pokemon itself is, self-recovery can restore it to its original state. At this time, even Igao, who was listening at the side, couldn't help but feel a little angry and embarrassed, and directly asked the guesses and doubts in his heart. Chapter 705 Taunting. What are you talking about? Isn't that right? Shouldn't self-recovery be able to heal anything? After all, even the most severely injured Pokemon can be restored to its original state. Yuyu's ears were ringing with Ego's seemingly foolish question, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Fuck, that saying is so true. Rogues aren't to be feared, but educated ones are. Baka, what are you talking about? Yo, I didn't expect someone so young to be so angry. Yuyu couldn't help but tease. Then, he quickly gestured for someone to calm down and pulled Serena, who was standing next to him, to his side. Well, this person next to me is also a relatively new trainer. I think Serena, you're the one who can answer the question you asked earlier. Serena blushed a little shyly at Yuyu's sudden pull to her side, her face flushed and her head lowered slightly. Although a little embarrassed, she finally mustered her courage, feeling Yuyu's immense trust standing beside her. Under the gaze of this hoodlum, Serena began to recall the Pokemon knowledge her teacher had taught her in class. Self-recovery and the photosynthesis ability unique to grass-type Pokemon actually have similar effects. Most of them restore Pokemon's health. However, they only restore health, not all negative effects on the Pokemon, so that's why the paralysis effect on Milotic from the electric ball didn't disappear after using self-recovery. Serena paused briefly, her gaze turning to Yuyu, who stood beside her, a questioning look in her eyes. Seeing Serena suddenly stop talking and look at him instead, Yuyu quickly realized what was happening. After admiring Serena's growth during this period, he smiled and nodded, signaling her to continue. Meanwhile, Serena, initially hesitant, felt a slight relief at Yuyu's prompt. And I think you've misunderstood the self-recover skill. To remove negative effects from a Pokemon, you can use skills like Mystic Guard. Serena hesitated again, biting her lip before reconsidering. And coincidentally, your Milotic has a skill like Mystic Guard that removes negative effects. Since your melodic can recover, it should be able to use Mystic Guard as well, given its level. Serena looked at him, as if to say, don't you know that's the case? At this moment, whether it was Eiji, Agao, or the surrounding gang members, all wore embarrassed expressions, filled with shame. Shame, truly shameful. The little girl's seemingly matter-of-fact expression suggested that this was something everyone who'd been to school should know. Yet, none of the older men, who looked several years older than her, knew it. You don't need to tell us, of course we know. I'm just testing you to see what you've learned in school and whether you've wasted your parents' money. As the only woman among them, Aji possessed a powerful and tsundere personality. She coughed lightly to mask her embarrassment and quickly returned her attention to the battle. Mystic Guard? Okay, let me see how much you've learned in school. Minchizu, use Mystic Guard, then Water Cannon. Aji barked orders continuously. Minechizu as expected, following Aji's command, Minchizu decisively used Mystic Guard. A soft, rainbow-colored light flashed across Minchizu's body, and the arcs of electricity that had been flickering and pulsating on its body began to vanish at a noticeable speed. With the combined effects of these two skills, accompanied by the self-recovery effect, Melodic returned to its state as it had been when it was released from the Pokéball. Yes, that's how it should be. That's what makes the fight fun. Seriously, a girl like you who doesn't even know the most basic knowledge about Pokemon. This fight is so boring. It has to be like this to be challenging. Upon witnessing this, Yu felt no fear. Instead, he waved his hand with a flourish, appearing high-spirited and his words filled with arrogance. However, only Yu knew his true thoughts. Although he said so, he couldn't help but feel a little heartbroken. After all, the difference between a melodic under the paralysis effect and one without it was as vast as the difference between heaven and earth. Perhaps this difference seemed insignificant to some, and they simply ignored it. But for a trainer like Yu, even a minor misstep in a Pokemon battle, let alone a paralysis effect, could potentially turn the tide. Therefore, let alone a long-lasting negative effect like paralysis, the potential benefits are enormous. Furthermore, if this had happened normally, when Pikachu and the others were at their peak, Yu wouldn't have felt a thing if Serena had simply reminded him. But this time, things were different. Pikachu was still a bit too weak. But there's a saying, you must not lose momentum. Ever since the weakened Pikachu was sent out, it had been constantly taunted. Now that there was an opportunity to taunt the enemy, Yu wasn't about to let it go. Furthermore, at this moment, he was surrounded by a swarm of thugs, and Yu was the only one holding his own. With a mindset of losing the battle, but not a battle, Yu threw himself into the fight. Chapter 706, Surrender. Is Yu truly alright? Serena was also well aware of the reasons above, otherwise she wouldn't have seemed so hesitant earlier. Seeing Yu acting so strangely, she asked with some concern. What could it be? It's just a bunch of thugs and girls. If I can't even defeat them, how can I challenge the Kalos League and win? Besides, only by defeating everyone in the Kalos League and winning the championship would he be qualified to return to his homeland and begin his true journey. So, no matter what, he must become stronger, and he would defeat those who stood in his way. Of course, Yu didn't say these last words out loud, he thought them in his mind. However, because of these words, Yu's eyes unconsciously grew firmer. And at that moment, Pikachu seemed to sense something. His eyes, previously uncertain due to his injuries, now became more resolute than ever. He was filled with an unwavering determination to defeat the melodic before him. How could he, just because of a minor injury, be defeated by his own stats? If he couldn't even defeat this melodic in this state, how could he possibly accompany his master to the end, to the summit, to battle Pokemon of equal or even greater strength? Pikachu with this thought, Pikachu felt his weakened body suddenly erupt with unprecedented strength. His spirit, previously somewhat shaky, seemed to be imbued with unprecedented momentum. Pikachu, let's defeat those who hinder our growth. Use Electro Ball. Pikachu with Pikachu's cry, the momentum of his neighbor, who had been at the forefront from the beginning, reached an all-time high. At the same time, the electric ball that had been gathering on his tail was now launched like a baseball, hurled directly at Melodic. Upon witnessing the scene, Yu's face broke into a heartfelt smile. If it weren't for the current situation, he'd probably have burst into a pop song. Today, the people are truly happy, because at this moment, Pikachu, perhaps inspired by some unknown source, had finally broken through the bottleneck that had held it back for so long. Its strength had even reached the king level, effectively announcing that Yu now had 2 king-level Pokémon at his disposal. With Charizard and Pikachu at the king level, Yu finally felt confident. And today, his Pokémon had broken through to the king level one after another. How could Yu not be happy? How could he not sing in his heart? However, while Pikachu had reached the king level, it also meant that his injuries had healed instantly. His injuries remained, but his strength had reached the king level. However, his ability to exert power was still limited to only 4 or 5 levels. While Banana had initially improved, whether it could turn the tide depended on its subsequent performance. Whether intentional or not, Pikachu didn't employ much skill with his lightning ball this time, instead slamming directly into the oncoming water cannon. Perhaps due to his increased strength, the lightning ball's impact with the water cannon didn't last long, as electric types are generally weak against water types. Therefore, the water cannon only held out for a moment before being shattered by the lightning ball. With its remaining power, it slammed directly into Milotic. This strike caught Milotic off guard once again, completely hitting it. Needless to say, it fell to the ground again, but the blow still didn't result in an instant kill, leaving it still holding its breath. However, this time, thanks to the experience from the previous time, it didn't even wait for Eiji's orders. Milotic consciously used a self-healing skill to heal its injuries, even casting a mysterious shield on itself just to be safe. Perhaps it was all the energy and strength Pikachu had expended on that penalty kick, but Pikachu's condition was akin to last gasp. After just a moment of excitement, Pikachu's body was once again shaky, looking as if it could collapse at any moment, yet it still held on. Is this a bit too much? Yu, excited about 2 of his Pokémon breaking through to the king level today, calmed down, though not with his usual frown. He had expected Pikachu's current state. Good job Milotic, that's it. I don't believe you can't keep him at bay. Use water cannon again, stop. I surrender this round. Before Eiji could even finish his command, Yu shouted. What, Yu? After hearing Yu shout this, the person who was most shocked wasn't Eiji, the opponent. At this moment, if anyone was the most shocked, it would have to be Serena and the other 2 girls. At this moment, whether it was Serena, Xiaoxu, or Air, they all looked unsure of themselves. This was still the Yu they knew. This was still the Yu they remembered, the one who loved to engage in Pokémon battles with others, a complete battle maniac. Was he the Pokémon battle maniac who would fight to the death and exhaust all his strength in the face of Zhou Yi, no matter how powerful the opponent was? I thought the word surrender should not appear in his vocabulary, but the word surrender came out of his mouth, so clearly and unbelievably. Hey, what are you doing? How can you admit defeat? Isn't your Pikachu still capable of fighting now? What a shame. I thought you had some great skills. I didn't expect you to be such a coward. Chapter 707 Yu's Disdain. After their initial shock, the thugs, led by Eiji, finally came to their senses and erupted in discontent. They were clearly displeased with Yu's sudden surrender. After all, they had watched the fight unfold. Why would they stop when they could have slaughtered him so hard? Yu, you actually admitted defeat. Is this the same Yu we remember? I didn't expect him to utter a single word, but today he actually did. Yu, are you okay? As the woman who had traveled with Yu the longest and knew him best, Serena, after the initial shock, was still a little incredulous. She looked at him with concern, fearing he wouldn't be able to withstand the shock. At the same time, Serena felt a pang of self-blame. It was all her fault for speaking too much earlier. If she hadn't warned him, the situation wouldn't be what it is now. Upon hearing Yu utter the word surrender, Pikachu, who had been struggling to hold on, was also stunned. He turned around and looked at his trainer with disbelief. How could he admit defeat? How could he admit defeat? Although he had been defeated before, because he wasn't invincible, he had experienced real battles and had no regrets. The word surrender was simply out of the question. But now his master had actually said it. If Serena and the other 2 had been the ones who had spent the most time with Yu during his journey, then Pikachu was the Pokémon who knew Yu best and had been with him the longest. Therefore, Pikachu's eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at Yu. Yu ignored the others' shocked glances and simply held Pikachu's stunned gaze. In that moment, it was as if time had stood still. Only Yu and Pikachu were left, their eyes fixed on each other. Although it seemed like only a few seconds had passed, the moment was just Yu and Pikachu, their eyes fixed on each other. However, to both Yu and Pikachu, it seemed like centuries had passed. Yu understood the emotions in Pikachu's eyes, and Pikachu also understood the meaning in Yu's eyes. At this moment, Pikachu, who was originally a little confused and seemed to be stuck in a dead end, seemed to have finally understood. After the two of them stared at each other for a long time, Pikachu finally smiled appropriately, and then his body softened. He fell to the ground. After all, no matter what, his injuries had not yet healed. And he had just experienced a battle that was not very intense. It can be said that it was extremely difficult to hold on until now. Yu hurriedly took a few steps to Pikachu's side and hugged Pikachu, whose body was about to make close contact with the ground. "That's really hard on you, Pikachu, but thank you all the same." Pika, as if he wanted to say something more, Pikachu suppressed the weakness in his body, squinting his small eyes at his trainer and calling out weakly. "Is Yu really okay?" Yu, holding Pikachu, handed it to Xiaoxu. Upon hearing the three women's slightly concerned inquiries, he smiled calmly, showing no trace of resignation or emotion. "Don't worry, I'm fine. It's just a loss, are you so surprised? Besides, rather than admitting defeat, I still hope Pikachu stays healthy, alright. I have a battle ahead of me, so I'll leave Pikachu in your care for now. Don't worry, I'll definitely win." Yu smiled brightly, even winking playfully at the two women. "I didn't expect you to give up like that. As a Pokemon trainer, you actually gave up? What a wimp. Not only did you abuse your Pokemon, you were so useless." Aji was clearly still resentful of Yu's surrender. She had never considered that a Pokemon trainer should face every challenge head-on. How could he give up so easily? After all, although his studies at the Angry Baby Academy weren't particularly impressive, there was a saying they taught her that she had always remembered. Pokemon battles are full of possibilities. Never give up until the very last moment, because only by persevering can you avoid regrets. Facing the opponent's aggressiveness, Yu was no longer in a rush to send out his next Pokemon. He calmly looked at Aji, who was looking a little angry with confusion, and at the group of thugs around him, who were also very unhappy with the outcome. "What? Did I say something wrong? Why are you glaring at me? If you keep glaring, I'll gouge your eyes out." Aji's little gangster aura was now on full display, her words filled with rage. "HMPH, Yu snorted with disdain. It was clear that he took none of the aggressive words or the menacing gazes. He even seemed to ignore them, his eyes scanning the group of thugs around him who were looking at him with ferocious expressions of displeasure. His gaze was calm, devoid of any emotion. "Yet, now you just want to fight to the death. Now you're thinking of what you learned in school. Haha, I don't know what you were taught in school, but I just want to say this, Pokemon are more than just your Pokemon, they're your battle partners. Each one of them is flesh and blood, with thoughts and minds. Therefore, we can't simply constrain them with their own ideas." As he spoke, the sneer on Yu's face grew even more pronounced. Indeed, Yu had visited several Pokemon academies before, for no other reason than to learn something. But what disappointed him, perhaps due to the standardized teaching methods, was that the knowledge imparted to students at every Pokemon Academy he had visited was largely theoretical. Even a Pokemon battle console was required for every student, forcing trainers to simply issue orders without assessing the situation. Based on this characteristic, the adjustments to Pokemon status actually effectively implemented the principle of fighting to the death, as the battle would only end when the Pokemon in the console lost its combat capability. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 708, Giant Crab Appears. Even a Pokemon battle console was a must for every person, forcing trainers to simply issue orders without assessing the situation. Based on this characteristic, the Pokemon status adjustments effectively embodied the principle of a relentless fight to the death, as they wouldn't retreat until the Pokemon inside the console lost its ability to fight. And it was precisely this aspect that Yu couldn't tolerate. Were they treating Pokemon as mere tools of battle? Was that all? Did Pichu accuse me of abusing Pokemon? Well, I'll show you what abuse truly means. Yu didn't want to explain further, but his gaze held an unprecedented coldness. It was clear that even the aura Yu unintentionally radiated had intimidated these student thugs still studying at school. Ag even cried out in shock, involuntarily backing away. However, as the leader of the group, Agao still possessed some courage. Although he was similarly startled by the aura Yu had unintentionally exuded, he quickly calmed down and met Yu's gaze. However, his eyes flickered, and he couldn't hold Yu's gaze for long. Tisk, bullying a weak woman? What's your skill? I'll take on you in this fight. Agu glanced at the group of minions surrounding him, his composure instantly rising, as if he'd found courage. Fine, I don't mind. After all, when it comes to torturing Pokémon, you need a worthy opponent. Otherwise, those are too weak, and I won't feel any sense of accomplishment. The wicked smile on Yu's face widened, clearly revealing his inner turmoil. In that case, let me see your true strength. Agu couldn't help but feel a little nervous as he spoke. After all, based on their brief encounter, the basket before him was probably not someone to be trifled with. But since he'd already provoked it, he'd have to fight it to the end. He still didn't believe the man before him could actually be picked up and thrown into the water below to feed those ferocious water Pokémon. Giant Crab, it's you. Without a moment's hesitation, the Pokéball was flung out. As Yu's only top-tier combatant, the giant crab immediately made a show of force upon its appearance. Its massive claws looked surprisingly sharp in the sunlight, and the occasional snapping sound was even more chilling. After evolving into the giant crab, the storyline was no longer the stunted, tiny creature of the original Grand Front. Instead, after training under Professor Oak, the giant crab had gained some strength and had now returned to its normal form. Furthermore, perhaps thanks to the presence of Xiaoxu, a top breeder, the giant crab, under Xiaoxu's care, was now even larger than its normal counterpart. It's true that the enlarged king crab looked even more imposing at this moment. That's a king crab, right? But how can it be so huge? That's outrageous. That's not a king crab at all. My storyline isn't even as big as his king crab. I get it. He's a cruel trainer indeed. He's actually feeding his king crab's hormones. As a group of scoundrel students who frequented the Cross-Sea Bridge, they knew plenty of common water-type Pokémon like king crabs. However, upon seeing a king crab sent by Yu, they were all utterly shocked. Tisk, stop using your ignorance to distort the facts and frame others. And taking hormones? Why aren't you taking hormones? Yu was even amused. These people before him really didn't study hard in school. Had they become so uncultured now? Pokémon raised poorly become hormone-fed, and Pokémon in poor condition become abuse. Under normal circumstances, Yu probably wouldn't have taken this so seriously, but would have simply laughed it off. But he absolutely shouldn't have said that at this moment, when Yu was already in such a bad mood. Wasn't that just adding fuel to the fire? Agu, seemingly sensing the uneasy look on Yu's face, silently groaned, but without a moment's delay, he quickly drew out his own Pokémon. Come out and fight. Scutella. A shell Pokémon with a shell so hard that even incendiary bombs can't break it. It only opens when attacking. This time, Yu didn't immediately engage in battle as he had last time. Instead, in full view of everyone, he pulled out the Pokémon encyclopedia and began to look up information on Scutella. As if influenced by Yu, Agu wasn't in a rush to engage in a Pokémon battle, but instead looked up information on Scutella. However, as he was still a student, not the type of Pokémon trainer who traveled extensively, Agao didn't have a Pokédex as handy as this, so he could only pull out a book and meticulously search through it. Giant Claw, the Claw Pokémon. It's the evolved form of the Giant Claw. Its sturdy claws have the power of 10,000 horsepower. For some unknown reason, Agao suddenly shouted out the contents of the book, drawing strange looks from both his subordinates and those on Yu's side. Interesting kid, but do you think I'll show mercy just like that? Yu had a vague idea of Agao's reasoning. As for why Yu had uncharacteristically used the Pokédex again, it was probably simply out of disdain for the Pokémon Academy's teaching methods. The first rule taught at Pokémon Academy was to check the information on the Pokémon the opponent was using before engaging in a Pokémon battle, supposedly because that was the only way to gain an advantage. Giant Crab, let these little devils see your strength. Use the freezing ray. Yu gave the order. Chapter 709, Giant Crab vs. Ironclad Shell. Steel back, use shellback. Agao gave the order at this point. He also had a rough idea in mind. After all, the Pokémon data he just looked up wasn't in vain. Wisely, facing Squirrel's attack, Squirrel didn't attack in response, but instead took the initiative to defend. He intended to test the enemy's strength before responding. Ago's order proved to be a perfect match. Using Shellback, Squirtle provided a similar defensive function to Blastoise. The seemingly powerful freeze beam was completely blocked, leaving only a layer of ice shards on Squirrel's surface. Steelback, seeing its freeze beam had no effect at all, Squirrel was immediately disheartened. It unleashed a barrage of freeze beams on Xiaoxu, firing them repeatedly in Squirtle's direction. However, facing the constant barrage of attacks from the Squirtle seemed to have truly transformed into a turtle-like Pokemon like Blastoise, remaining huddled in its shell and offering no counterattack. The freezing force of the freeze beam struck its outer shell, leaving only shallow icy streaks. That Squirtle shell is useless. It's comparable to Blastoise's. Its defense is top tier. Your Squirtle wouldn't be able to withstand this level of attack. At this moment, Ago, seeing that the Squirtle couldn't penetrate the Squirtle's defenses, immediately relaxed his previously tense heart and burst into laughter. He was even confident in the defensive power of his Squirtle shell, appearing fearless. It's a very hard shell, indeed, comparable to Blastoise's. But there's no such thing as absolute defense, there are always weaknesses. Your Scutum is no exception. Now that Scutum's warm-up exercises are over, let's show them what you're made of. Go ahead, smash their shell to pieces. Yi Yu's face was filled with indescribable arrogance. It seemed as if his outstretched hands clenched together in excitement, forming powerful fists, signaling the start of Scutum's wave-like attack. Go, Scutum, use Crab Punch. Claws receiving the command from its trainer, Scutum didn't hesitate, pulsing its legs and raising its massive, glowing claws. Although Scutum crawled sideways, its footwork was no less swift. In just 2 breaths, Scutum had arrived in front of Scutum, which had retracted into its shell, forming a massive shell. Without hesitation, he didn't hesitate to strike the shovel in the face, as the shovel didn't reveal its face. He swung his massive, glowing claws and smashed them down on the shovel's shell. Bang! The massive claws collided with the hard shell with a resounding sound. It wasn't as expected. The powerful crabs were enough to knock the shovel out of the shovel while it was using its lecture skill. Instead, the giant crab's claws swung forward and landed on the shovel's shell. With a loud bang, the giant crab's giant claws bounced back as if hitting soft fabric. What do you mean? It's useless. Shovel's shell has one of the strongest defenses in the world. You're just dreaming of breaking through Shovel's defenses with just one giant crab's attack. Seeing this, Aga laughed heartily. Even after the giant claw crab was defeated by the metal chestnut, he no longer had all the nervousness he had at the beginning when facing Yi Yu. He seemed particularly relaxed and looked confident about the battle at this time. Exciting and exciting. Look at that big crab on the other side that keeps hitting. They look so stupid. The boss said that the giant claw crab's attack is useless against metal chestnut, but they still don't believe it. They are so stubborn. So, is there nothing they can do about our boss's metal chestnut? At this time, AG also crossed his arms across his chest, looking like he was watching a show, and even couldn't help but reveal a sneer on his face. I say you should admit defeat as soon as possible. Your giant crab has not been able to break through the defense of Metagross, so it has already been defeated. And if Metagross keeps doing this, it will be invincible. I advise you to admit defeat as soon as possible. Besides, even if you admit defeat, it's no big deal. At most, you will be delayed in crossing the bridge. None of us will make it difficult for you. At most, we will let you stay and race with me. Didn't we see you riding a bicycle and having a lot of fun before? When it came to this, the group of thugs around couldn't help but burst into laughter after hearing the training of their big sister, and each one was more exaggerated than the other. Your shell is indeed quite hard, but what does that mean? It's true that I can't break it, but if you keep it that way, doesn't that mean you can fight back? At most, it'll just be a battle of stamina, a mutual injury. Yi Yu remained unmoved. Even facing the mockery of the crowd around him, he couldn't help but scratch his ears, his expression nonchalant. With Yi Yu's casual words, the once lively scene instantly fell silent. Everyone's eyes widened, as if they were like Siddiq being strangled, unable to utter a single sound. Yes, yes. Although the giant crab on the opposite side can't break the defense of the armored shell. But if we keep defending like this, doesn't it mean that we can't win? I say, can you have some brains? You believe everything the other side says. Is he stupid or you? That's it, stupid. Don't say I know you, we can also fight back, okay? Just wait until the giant crab can't swing its big claws, then it's time for our boss to fight back." Just when one of the gangsters seemed to believe Yu's words and raised his doubts, he was immediately angrily attacked by his companions around him. Poor little gangster, after being the first to speak out for a while, he immediately became the target of public criticism. Chapter 710, Destroy. Yu, I'm sure you've heard it too. My little brothers are right. Perhaps blindly defending won't win me the ultimate victory, but if it comes to endurance, I'm not afraid of you. After all, if your giant crab keeps hitting me like this, it's likely to lose its combat capability sooner or later. Then, while your giant crab is tired, my armored clams will attack. What can you do? Egu seemed to be trying to make up for his earlier verbal disadvantage, and his tone was also somewhat aggressive. Oh, really? Then you can try it. Let's see who tires first, my giant crab, or your armored clams. Yu was unconcerned, not even considering stopping the giant crab and pounding the armored clams with his crab fists. Don't stop, giant claw crab. Keep using your crab punches and increase their power. Show your nerve and let them see just how much endurance you have, giant claws. Upon receiving its master's command, the giant claw crab immediately swung its crab punches with even greater force. As the crab punches rained down, their impact resonated. Often, some were deflected due to the sheer force. Even so, shaken by the rebounding force, the giant claw crab continued to swing its crab punches. You have to understand that with each powerful blow, the rebound increased in intensity. Furthermore, the giant claw crab maintained its high speed and high frequency swings, resulting in each crab punch being accompanied by a heavy rebound. An ordinary giant claw crab would likely collapse even after a few powerful blows, let alone maintaining such a high frequency. But the giant crab, like a tireless robot, simply kept swinging its fists up and down. Oh my god, this giant crab is so fierce. Even gold wouldn't be able to withstand such a high-frequency hammering. Not only that, this hammering style reminds me of the chaotic cloak hammering technique of a certain great novel master. It's insane. Even though we're just rivals now, I have to say I love it. I love it. I used to think giant crabs were just weaklings. I didn't expect them to be so powerful. When I get back this time, I must capture and subdue one to train. The thugs watching the figure in the arena, who continued to swing its crab fists as time passed, were all in order. It couldn't be helped. Perhaps at first, this random pattern seemed quite ordinary, but the longer you watched, the more you realized that the giant crab's movements now left after images. If it weren't for the white light flickering on its claws, you wouldn't have been able to see them. Ignoring the surprised looks of those around it, the giant crab continued its assault. But what's the saying? Hard work pays off, and water wears away stone. After a long period of relentless hammering, the giant crab finally yielded a small reward with a crisp, resounding sound. Upon hearing this resounding sound, Yu's face lit up with a confident smile. I've said before, there's no such thing as absolute defense. Even if there were, there would always be a flaw. Giant crab, this is your last punch. Hit it with all your might, giant claws. The giant crab seemed to finally react. Receiving such a powerful command from its master, it was filled with excitement, its mouth foaming with excitement. In a mere moment, before Agao and the others could react, the giant crab's punch had already landed. However, this time, unlike before, it wasn't blocked by the ironclad shell. With a crisp, melodious sound, the scimitar, which had been constantly defending itself with its various skills, suddenly let out a scream. Then, the tightly closed shell suddenly opened, revealing the agonized face of the scimitar. The relentless hammering of the giant crab, coupled with the surprisingly consistent placement of its strikes, whether intentional or not, had caused the first cracking sound. By then, tiny cracks had appeared where the scimitar had been repeatedly hammered, like a spider web. While these tiny cracks in the shell might seem insignificant, they were the key to victory. After all, a tiny crack in a shield that was once considered an absolute defense meant it could no longer hold its ground. It was even more surprising that the scimitar key could still block every attack, especially against this tiny crack. Metallic shell, Egu cried out in shock, immediately attempting to lift the shell up and inspect its condition. But would you give him that opportunity? The answer was clearly no. Why are you so happy hiding in your shell? You can keep hiding now. Yu's face was filled with a playful smile. Attack while you're weak was his only combat principle. So, without a second thought, the giant claw crab wouldn't give its opponent any chance, unleashing a barrage of water directly in the direction of the metallic shell. Damn it! You think we're sick cats if we don't show our might? Metallic shell, show them what you're made of. Use your freeze ray. Oh, sure. Now you're finally not a coward anymore and know how to fight back. But do you think you can withstand the giant claw crab's water cannon like that? That's a bit naive. As expected, Yu's words fell. The water cannon launched by the Caribbean followed a visible trend, directly pushing the freezing ray in its direction. It should be noted that at this moment, Caribbean might not be as strong as Pikachu, who had already broken through, but before this, their strength was roughly equal, at least at the same level. Moreover, Caribbean was not like Pikachu, injured a moment ago, but was in pristine peak condition. Therefore, it can be said that the two sides were on the same level from the beginning. However, Caribbean was still Yu's Pokemon, and was still a point stronger. Chapter 711, Breaking the Shell. And while the constant pounding of the crab-fisted slams against the shell of the scuttler just now might seem like a significant drain on its stamina, that's not the case. For starters, Yu prioritizes physical strength when training his Pokemon. This results in Yu's Pokemon having significantly more stamina than the others, regardless of any given situation. Furthermore, the scuttler is a unique Pokemon. Its daily training involves constantly pushing its giant claws, thereby increasing the stamina of the scuttler's attacks. Another point, don't assume that the scuttler's attacks consume a significant amount of stamina. Do you really think that the scuttler's shell is truly omnipotent, capable of absolutely defending it? Have you heard of the technique of hitting the bull from behind the mountain? Furthermore, the scuttler's high-frequency hammering must have been quite uncomfortable for the scuttler. In some ways, the stamina consumed by the scuttler was even greater than that of the scuttler. As expected, the water cannon and the freezing ray collided. The freezing ray only held out for a moment before gradually retreating to the side. Damn! I didn't expect this giant crab to have such stamina. But do you think my clams are only capable of this? That's too naive. Clams use shell break, then use freeze ray again. What? This clams can actually break its shell. Yu's brows furrowed unconsciously, his once confident expression fading. What kind of skill is shell break? Why does the guy on the other side look so panicked and surprised? I don't know. I've never even heard of shell break, let alone seen it. Is this a new skill, or was it developed by the boss? The group of younger brothers around him, upon seeing this, began to raise questions. However, after asking around, no one knew what shell break was. It was all because they hadn't paid attention in class before, resulting in not only poor grades but also a lack of theoretical knowledge. Therefore, driven by curiosity, each one of them, their hearts like being scratched by a cat, desperately wanted to know what exactly this skill, shell breaking, was. However, no one had explained it to them, which was extremely frustrating. So, each of them instinctively glanced across at Serena, who was already extremely nervous due to the battle between Yu and the others. They hoped that the girl who had previously explained the mysterious bodyguard to them would explain shell breaking again. Serena, who had been concentrating on watching the battle, suddenly looked up, startled by the sight before her. She saw pairs of eyes staring at her intently, their eyes filled with intense intent. Why are you looking at me like that? Serena, even after the previous experience, felt a little embarrassed by the attention she received. Not to mention their wolf-like gazes, they instinctively retreated behind Yu again, leaving only a small HUD peeking out. Can you tell us what shell break is? Yeah, I'm really curious about that, too. What exactly is shell break? At this point, the group of punks rushed to ask their questions. Even AG was curious. After all, they hadn't learned much at Pokemon Academy. Of course, that was theoretical knowledge, they hadn't learned enough, but the practical aspects were still there. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the confidence to intercept the enemy at a busy cross-sea bridge, where trainers passed by every day. As for why they didn't ask AG's leader, the person in charge, it was because he was completely immersed in the battle and had no time to listen to their questions. After all, the battle had just begun. I see. Wait a moment, then. I've never heard of or seen shell break before. Serena felt a little embarrassed. After all, those people were looking at her expectantly, hoping she could help them. But she didn't know the answer immediately, which was a bit embarrassing. As if afraid that the other party would be extremely upset and do something impulsive if I wasn't happy with it, Serena, no longer bothered by embarrassment or shyness, quickly emerged from behind Yu to offer help, waving her hands repeatedly. Well, don't worry. I'll check the information. I have the Pokédex. It'll be quick. As she spoke, Serena quickly pulled out her Pokédex and began searching for the skill Shellbreak. Found it. I see. It must be said that Pokémon are truly high-tech products. This small Pokédex combines powerful functions such as identity authentication, Pokémon recognition, and data storage. It's like having a Pokédex in hand and being able to travel the world. Under everyone's expectant gaze, Serena unpacked the information she'd just learned. Shellbreak. This is the opposite of Shell Shrink. If Shellbreak increases the Pokémon's defense, then Shellbreak reduces it while increasing its attack power. Serena's explanation of the skills was incredibly concise and easy to understand. The group of thugs present quickly grasped the meaning. The more resourceful ones, recalling their previous battles, immediately had their eyes light up. Ha ha ha, I know why that guy's face is so grim. No wonder. Tisk 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 shit, stop keeping us in suspense. Tell us now and let us all have some fun. However, there were also a few classes that were still struggling to wrap their heads around them, asking their fellow comrades who had suddenly realized the truth. Oh my god, you guys haven't even understood what I'm saying. Are you stupid? I told you to read more, but you wouldn't? And now you're completely illiterate. Stop lecturing me. You're making a scene. Tell me what you just understood. You're laughing so happily, because the author is still a student. I have an important exam this month. My studies have become too demanding, so I'll only update one chapter this month. I'll resume the 2-chapter update after the exam. Please forgive me for this. Chapter 712. The battle continues. Alright, let go of your hands. I'm busy. Seeing his companions surrounding him, each one looking at him with a hint of anticipation and curiosity, the thug being questioned couldn't help but feel proud, as if he were the top student among this bunch of underachievers. He coughed softly, drawing everyone's attention back to him, and then, with a proud expression, he revealed what he knew. Things are easy to understand. Think about the previous battle between the bosses Metagross and the opponent. It was a battle of one attack and one defense. Metagross, in particular, was in a defensive state of using its shell from almost the very beginning. I won't go into details about how many times its defense was increased. And since the shell breaking skill has the effect of weakening the Pokémon's own defense to increase its attack power, doesn't it show how strong the Pokémon's own defense is, and how strong its attack power will be after using the shell breaking skill? Oh, I see. I say, you're good, you have a sharp mind, you're lucky to have a quick reaction. In fact, I've guessed all this a long time ago. I just wanted to test you. After getting the answers they wanted, these hooligans put away their curiosity, pretended to be indifferent, and replaced their unfathomable smiles with looking at the two Pokémon that were still fighting in the field. And most importantly, attack is the best defense. When your offensive power reaches a certain level, you won't even need defense. Meanwhile, Xiaozhi, who had been secretly listening to the discussion with her ears perked up, folded her arms across her chest, stared straight ahead, and added calmly with the air of a master. It seemed only in this way could she further emphasize her status as the boss. Is that really true? Without the defense of Cheetah, is Cheetah still Cheetah? Although Yu's attention was focused on the battle between the two Pokémon, a warrior's habit made her vigilant. Therefore, after hearing the discussion and Xiaozhi's additional words, a strange smile played on her lips. Giant claws. Meanwhile, under the expectant gazes of the crowd, the two Pokémon finally engaged in another chaotic battle. However, this time, thanks to the effects of its shellbreak skill, Cheetah's attacks became much more powerful. Initially facing a potential downfall, it was now fighting Cheetah on equal terms. Not only that, but as time wore on in this exchange of attacks, Arceus was even gaining the upper hand. That's it, Arceus, use Ice Needles. Has the increased attack power made you cocky? Scrabble, use Crab Punch to smash those Ice Needles. Upon receiving the trainer's order, Scrabble didn't hesitate. He swung his massive claws, smashing the incoming Ice Needles one by one. Under Scrabble's wield, Crab Punch was like a sledgehammer, not only impervious to air but also packed with deadly force. Wherever it struck, the Ice Needles were reduced to shatters. Furthermore, Scrabble began to slowly move forward while swinging his Crab Punch. It couldn't be helped. Scrabble was a crawling Pokémon after all. If it were a fast-moving Pokémon like Pikachu, why would it need to dodge like this? Still, this was a steady, solid charge forward. Ironclad Shell uses water cannon. Seeing that the Ice Needle seemed to be having no effect, Agao didn't hesitate and quickly changed his tactics. He transformed the more scattered Ice Needle attacks into the more powerful water cannon. Although the attack range was reduced, the effect was obvious. The power generated by the water cannon bombardment was obviously enormous. Because the situation was so sudden, the giant crab was caught off guard and could only hastily raise its huge claws to block. Fortunately, since the giant crab had no time to change its tactics, my crab fist was still as powerful as ever. When faced with a water cannon attack, I once again met it fiercely, colliding with it. However, with the effect of the shell break skill, Xiangshifei's skills were significantly more powerful. In the clash of water cannon and crab fist, the water cannon was clearly more powerful. The giant crab's crab fist, due to the huge counterforce, flung its entire claw backwards. Fortunately, through regular training, Yu had cultivated the resilience of each Pokémon in his care. Even in the face of his entire arm being bent backward, the crawler remained silent. Beyond the resolute look in its eyes, there was a subtle ruthlessness. This was the aura of someone determined to shatter their enemy, determined to tear a single piece of flesh from his enemy, even to the death. The release of the water cannon gave the crawler a slight reprieve, but even in that brief reprieve, the crawler was already foaming at the mouth, its pace accelerating. Crawler, on the other hand, was physically limited. Although gifted with a hard shell, it was practically a punching bag, vulnerable to attack. Seeing the crawler approaching again, Crawler immediately used his shell retraction skill again. Without even a single command from Agao, Crawler executed the move with unwavering grace. As for the question of whether using shell retraction again would get him hit? And hadn't the giant claw crab smashed open his shell in the previous battle? So why use shell retraction? It was a completely desperate move, simply driven by instinct. After all, it was better than being completely defenseless against the giant claw crab's punch. Despite the look on his face, he'd be completely doomed after taking a full blow from the giant claw crab. Furthermore, after using shell break, shell retraction was completely defenseless. It was too late. Just as the giant claw crab's punch was about to land, shell retraction had shielded itself within its shell. Bang, bang, then, a few more crisp sounds echoed, and shell retraction, completely on its defense, was sent flying. Chapter 713 Moment of Crisis. Dongbang. A few more crisp sounds followed, and the fully defensive Mekong was sent flying. But in the next moment, Yiyu's expression suddenly changed. Before anyone could react, he had already taken the lead and rushed forward. Everyone stared in surprise. Though they hadn't yet registered, their eyes subconsciously followed Yiyu's movements. As Mekong retracted its shell for defense, the giant crab's powerful punch sent Mekong flying backwards. Unfortunately, the group of thugs weren't surrounded by Mekong's shell, only the railing on the seaside of the cross-sea bridge remained. However, at this moment, the immense force of the giant crab's attack not only sent Mekong flying backwards, but also caused the surrounding railing to cave in due to the continuous force from its body. Having entered the realm of harmony, the armored angel was unaware of the surroundings. Consequently, he was unable to adjust quickly, and when his entire body slammed into the guardrail, one of the rails, seemingly unable to withstand the force, shattered. Originally woven from 2 or 3 bars, the impact had not only broken one, but the majority of it had protruded outwards, completely embedding the armored angel within it. Furthermore, the armored angel's body was now precarious, poised to crash into the calm sea at any moment. However, since his body was supported by one of the railings, the curled-up armored angel began to sway from side to side, as if a gust of wind would tip the balance and send him plummeting into the water. However, it wasn't just Yu who stepped forward to rescue him, the giant crab also did the same. In fact, the giant crab was even faster than Yu, as it was one of the victims. Clearly feeling the force of his own power, and especially catching sight of the scene in the ocean behind him, the scorpion, which had been spewing foam from its mouth, ceased its foaming. As the scorpion moved, even the foam dangling from its mouth began to fly in all directions. Without even realizing it, the scorpion opened its shells, and with this movement, its previously balanced body began to tilt backwards. Unexpectedly, Scorpion was completely terrified. Even with its formidable defenses and being a water-type Pokémon, a fall from such a height would likely injure it severely. Furthermore, after the intense battle with the scorpion, he was already exhausted. A fall like this wouldn't allow him to regain the strength needed to float. Consequently, after regaining his composure, Scorpion revealed a look of terror. His body subconsciously shook, and he tried to tumble off the supporting railing. It was only because of the size of the scimitar, coupled with the unwieldy weight of its shell, that the scimitar's movement was limited. Instead of the railing being flexibly rolled free, the scimitar's body actually shook even more violently under its weight. Just as the scimitar struggled to free itself, its balance unsteady, and on the verge of plummeting toward the sea below, the giant crab finally arrived with unprecedented speed. It swiftly flung its crab claws out, but this time, without the ferocious attack of the previous time, it simply clung to the spiky spikes protruding from the scimitar's body. Although the giant crab had already grasped the scimitar, it was still a step too late. Due to its previous imbalance, the majority of the scimitar had already left the bridge, leaving only 1/3 of its body inside, firmly grasped by the giant crab's powerful claws. Even so, the scaly crab, clutching the scaly clams, was slowly dragged along with the scaly clams, leaving behind only a few shallow traces, evidence of a scaly crab's previous efforts to save another Pokémon. Though it poured all its might into its claws, the scaly crab had, after all, experienced a fierce battle. Furthermore, in that previous battle, the scaly crab had made the most use of its claws. Consequently, the scaly crab was now struggling, unable to hold on, relying on its last breath. As a fellow water-type Pokémon, the scaly clams knew that if it were plunged into the water from the height of the cross-sea bridge, given its current state, it would likely not be able to withstand it. Furthermore, if it didn't immediately float, it would likely be carried away by the current. Remember, the cross-sea bridge, besides being over 10 meters above the sea, was also a real sea. Normally, there were many cargo ships and cruise ships sailing along the route, making it truly interconnected. If it fell into the sea, it would likely be goodbye to its trainer. However, the crab was powerless at this moment, its body constantly being dragged forward. However, the crab was quite formidable. To avoid being completely dragged down by Cherub, it clamped one claw firmly around Cherub while digging its other, much smaller claw, into the ground, attempting to support itself. Just as everyone was recovering from the shock of the scene, Yu had already arrived and quickly extended his arm to hold the crab, which was being pulled forward by Cherub. However, due to Cherub's immense weight, the force of the fall, and the prolonged effort, the crab had reached its limit. Next, I don't know if it was because of the above reasons, or perhaps the crab claws that were holding the protruding spikes on the body of the giant crab slipped, but the giant crab's body began to reorganize and slip out of the giant crab's claws. Chapter 714 Reluctance. Not good, Giant Claw's steelback is in danger. By this time, both those watching from afar and the giant claws had noticed something was amiss. It was too late to intervene. After all, by then, Steelback's body was already outside the bridge. If it weren't for the giant claw's relentless grip, Steelback would have already fallen into the water, swept away. Steelback, my Steelback, Agu, who had already rushed over, stumbled upon seeing this, and lunged forward, reaching forward with a desperate roar, his eyes filled with despair and a fear of self-doubt. Unconsciously, as he watched Steelback's body slipping from the giant claw's claws, tears trickled down his cheeks onto the floor, blurring his vision. One can only imagine how much pain a boy who had been so arrogant before, now showing such a vulnerable expression, must be feeling right now. Metallic shell, metallic shell, metallic shell. At this moment, shouts erupted from the surrounding group of minions, who seemed to have only just recovered from their shock. They wanted to help, but it was too late. They could only freeze in their places once again, staring at their leader, who looked so vulnerable and helpless, and shouting out in frustration and shock. "I've got you. This time, let's see how you run," Yiyu's voice uttered with a hint of labor. Suddenly, Yiyu had already let go of his support for the giant crab and pounced directly on the metallic shell, which was about to be submerged. He grabbed hold of another prominent spike on its body. By this time, Yiyu's body was already in a state of disarray from his previous leap to the rescue. Putting aside the constant downward pull from the immense force of the fall, Yiyu's clothes were now tattered from rubbing against the ground, leaving large swaths of skin exposed to the air and rubbing against the floor. Simply because the giant crab's strength had reached its limit, and suddenly without Yiyu's support, it was thrown forward by the force of the falling armored shell. Even with its forelegs firmly supporting the ground and its weight tilting backward, it was still dragged forward, nearly sliding forward and plunging into the sea with the armored shell. Even so, the once pristine, flat bridge was plowed into 4 deep grooves by the giant crab's passage. If the giant crab was so utterly wrecked, then Yu was even more utterly miserable. The sudden force of the fall had left Yu unable to react, and his exposed skin rubbed against the ground, leaving bloody marks everywhere. The guardrail, previously dented and broken by the sudden impact of the armored shell, now pierced Yu's calf. This left Yu in a T-shaped position, half entering and half exiting the giant crab, clinging to the armored shell. Ironclad. Ironclad, clearly, his body sagged precipitously from the sudden release of his strength, startling the already panicked armored shell. Though he wasn't completely trapped within his shell as he had been at the beginning, he still cried out incessantly, his cries filled with desolation and fear. Because he was holding the armored shell, Yu was closer, able to more clearly discern the emotion in his eyes. What kind of look was that? It was filled with fear of death and uncertainty about the future. But Yu discerned a hidden meaning in that look, a reluctance to leave. This reluctance wasn't simply a reluctance to live long enough, nor was it a reluctance to leave this beautiful world. But more than anything, it was a reluctance to part with his trainer. As for why Yu could even read the emotions expressed by Metapod at this critical moment, it was because Yu had seen countless such expressions in Metapod's eyes. Take the Pokémon in his hand, for example. Every time they separated, this emotion would be expressed in their eyes. Over time, Yu could subconsciously discern these emotions. Metapod, calm down. Calm down. Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. Yu didn't bother to acknowledge the other Pokémon's reluctance, rushing to comfort them. Even though his body was burning with pain, Yu maintained a warm and gentle smile as he comforted Metapod. However, the occasional frown on his face revealed that Yu wasn't in the best of health. After all, while Yu possessed the strength of a Grandmaster and possessed a formidable physique, that was mostly due to his internal energy protecting him. But now, all of his internal energy was concentrated in his hands. Without internal energy entwined within his body, Yu's current physique was likely limited to the level of being able to withstand punches without feeling pain. He hadn't yet reached the point where he could completely withstand attacks from metal or iron. Look, there's still hope for Ironclad. Hurry up and help. What are you all just standing there for? Hurry up and help. At that moment, someone noticed the situation first, pointing at Yu's precarious situation and shouting. With only a split second to react, following the thug's exclamation, Agao and Ag, the 2 leaders, also reacted quickly calling out and rushing out. Agao's expression, in particular, was one of madness, yet also a touch of humor. After all, no matter how grimy someone's face, with traces of tears on it, or even a trail of snot hanging from their nose, their expression, a mixture of tears, laughter, and a touch of madness, was truly hilarious. You guys are really slow to react. You finally came. If you hadn't come sooner, I really couldn't hold on. Yu looked at the increasing number of thugs gathered around him, especially Agu who was closest to him, and couldn't help complaining. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 715 Self-Blame. Sorry, Agu didn't know if he was responding to Yu or addressing the clapper, who was looking at him with hope. He quickly reached out and grasped the protrusion on the clapper shell. Soon, with the help of a group of people and a giant crab, the clapper was pulled up again. Though the process was brief, everyone was exhausted and panting. After all, the clapper's weight was not enough, not to mention the weak terrain. Everyone collapsed from exhaustion, lying on the asphalt and cement road, which was still a mess after the previous battle. As for why they didn't sit and lean on the guardrail, that was nonsense. After the incident, everyone was still in shock. The sight of the sea was terrifying, let alone leaning on the railing. If it suddenly broke, they would be dead. What kind of low-quality guardrail am I throwing at this? It's so fragile, and they dare to put it on a bridge like this. Aren't they afraid of something happening? It better not let me know which bastard produced it, otherwise I'll make him drop it and beat him up. I'm so angry. This broken guardrail, I'd complain right now. A group of hooligans lay on the ground, discussing it, their faces still full of fear. But most of them were indignant and complained about the guardrail manufacturer. Look, each of them has already thought about how to treat these manufacturers properly when they meet them. But unlike everyone else, Yu seemed much calmer. Yu, how are you? You're bleeding. How are you hurt so badly? You need to bandage this quickly. Xiaoxu, hurry, hurry. I remember we have bandages. I'll get them now, you bandage it. Serena and the others also rushed over. Seeing Yu's miserable state, especially the wound on his calf from the guardrail, their eyes were slightly red, and tiny drops of crystals were already gathering in them. Xiaoxu, who seemed more delicate, had red eyes and felt a little distressed, but she fought back tears. Air, who usually looked so optimistic, was already crying, but her hand covering her mouth prevented the sobs from coming out. Xiaoxu silently bandaged Yu's calf. Serena's eyes were also red, and she looked at Yu's calf, which was still bleeding even after Xiaoxu had bandaged it, and her eyes were filled with resentment. She didn't know how many times this had happened. Time and again, in every moment of danger, Yu bravely stepped forward to protect them. And they, like frail girls, were shielded at the back, unable to offer any assistance. Perhaps, of the three women in the traveling group, Xiaoxu was the most instrumental and helpful to Yu. After all, Xiaoxu was a top-notch Pokémon breeder, and had also studied medicine with Yu for a long time. While her skills weren't as impressive as Yu's, she was still quite capable of emergency bandaging. Furthermore, being a Pokémon breeder herself, she was incredibly adept at handling Pokémon. And what about Air? While her role wasn't as significant as Xiaoxu's, she was still incredibly powerful. At least that was what Serena thought. After all, besides Pokémon performances, Air was also superior to her in Pokémon battles. Thinking of this, Serena's heart couldn't have fallen any lower. Her eyes, already slightly red from Yu's injury, were now filled with tears. Silly girl, why are you crying? It's just a minor skin injury. It's nothing. And you know, I'm a powerful warrior. A minor injury like this is nothing. Serena, completely lost in her own despair, was suddenly overcome by a wave of warmth. Suddenly, she felt something touching her cheek, a warm touch. This snapped her out of her trance. Hey, what's with that expression on your face? This isn't like the cheerful and optimistic Serena I know, the one who always comforts me. As if provoked by Yu's gesture, Serena looked up, and the tears that had been welling up in her eyes suddenly burst forth like a flood. Yu, oblivious to the pain in his calf, quickly reached out to wipe the tears from Serena's face. Yu, I'm sorry. Am I really so useless? Serena couldn't tell if she was apologizing for her inability to help, or for the trouble her earlier introduction had caused Yu. Her expression was fragile, like a child who'd done something wrong and was afraid of being scolded by their parents. How could that be? No, I'm not. How could Serena be useless? To me, Serena is a very, very trustworthy partner. Yu forced a smile, but he continued to wipe the tears from Serena's cheek. Perhaps from the excessive blood loss from his recent injury, or for some other reason, his face looked a little pale. Yu, feeling the warmth from Yu's slightly rough hands, Serena's sadness finally eased. Especially after seeing Yu's eyes full of sincerity and without any pretense, she was deeply moved. Her pretty face was even brighter. But maybe it was because she was shy, but her face was flushed, which was very cute. Okay, don't let your imagination run wild in the future. We are all traveling together, and we can't do without each other. And, wipe your snot quickly. Yu laughed with a hint of teasing. Hate it. Serena didn't care about much at this time. She stood up quickly, turned her back and touched up her makeup. Chapter 716 Battle. Hey, you're going too far. Showing off your affection will get you killed. Oh my, how dare you? You're showing off your affection in public like that, oblivious to everyone around you. Do you really think we don't exist? Yeah, how can you show off your affection in public? Are you bullying us singles? Tisk, what's there to envy or be jealous of? It's just a girlfriend, right? I'm not envious or jealous at all. Yeah, we're all noble singles. We have extra time for dating, so why not spend it on racing? Is it that bikes aren't as exciting anymore, or that racing isn't as thrilling anymore? Then, from the side, a series of slightly disgruntled voices rang out. But from their words, it was clear to hear a thick layer of jealousy, a hint of lemon. Serena blushed once more. The blush that had been fading suddenly flared back, a lingering feeling. Feeling the gazes of everyone present, Serena felt a surge of shyness, and a subconscious panicked attempt at denial. However, no matter how long she thought about it, she still couldn't say anything. Therefore, she could only look at her two good sisters for help. Selena, you are too cunning. We agreed to compete fairly. How can you eat alone? Aer's cheeks, which were still slightly stained with tears, were now puffed with anger. Selena, you have changed. You are no longer the Serena I knew. When did you become so cunning? Tell me, have you done something behind our backs? Xiaoguang glared at Serena with her beautiful eyes, as if she could make Serena feel guilty and confess honestly with a death stare. Looking at Serena's pitiful and pleading eyes, Yu could only shrug helplessly, indicating that he was unable to help. This wave of people around, especially Aer and his three daughters, were even more angry. Okay, Yu, I've stopped the bleeding, but please don't do any more strenuous exercise. Xiaozu also stood up at this time, and as she spoke, she and her son carefully helped Yu to his feet. Okay, you don't have to be like this. I'm fine. It's just a minor injury. Look how scared you are. As Yu spoke, he looked down at the wound on his leg. However, when he saw the very beautiful and lovely bow tied on his calf, a drop of cold sweat couldn't help but drip on his forehead, and his face turned black. It's okay. Look how cute the butterfly is. Lulu Xiaozu stuck out her pink tongue in a slightly naughty manner. Oh my god, are you guys done yet? Yu, indeed, you did help me save the armored shell just now, and I am very grateful to you. But don't forget, we are still fighting. At this time, Egu, as if unable to bear it any longer, jumped out again. His face was filled with indignation, but it wasn't clear if it was at himself or at Yu's actions. As soon as Egu jumped out, he was immediately met with criticism from the others. Hey, what's wrong with you? Yu just helped you save Metal Celestium, and you're not grateful, but you're acting like this. That's right. People like him are just disgusting. Ungrateful, that's what they call him. Serena and Aer's angry cries were immediately reminiscent of him. Seeing Yu's disheveled appearance and the wound on his calf, they felt even more sorry for him. Yes, Mr. Hooligan, can you please let us through? We're really in a hurry, we have something urgent to do. Xiaoguang's face was also slightly dissatisfied. But her calm nature still managed to plead softly. Perhaps it was because the words hit home, or perhaps it touched a sore spot. Egu immediately flew into a rage, interrupting Yu before he could even finish. Stop the nonsense. This was already agreed upon. How could I stop just because you saved my ironclad? You're looking down on us Pokemon trainers. Well, that's very kind of you. In the name of Pokemon trainers, let's continue the battle. Yu, why are you always like this? Yes, this isn't fair to you at all. Yu, you really piss me off. Why are you always trying to sabotage us? Yu's words had barely escaped him, but before he could deliver a single inspiring line, the three women turned their ire on him again, their faces flushing red with anger. Especially when they saw the three women surrounding him, one of them suddenly reached out a sinister hand and grabbed his waist. Caught off guard, Yu grimaced in pain. But even so, watching Yu walk out from under their encirclement, Serena and the other two simply exchanged glances before saying nothing more. While their words of concern and admonishment towards Yu were full of discontent, and their disapproval of his constant disregard for their own circumstances and his willingness to engage in battle, they silently supported every decision Yu made. Just like now. Haha Yu, you truly amaze me. You're truly a manly trainer. If you hadn't been abused by your Pokemon earlier, I'd have chopped off your head, burned yellow paper, and sworn brotherhood with you. After the events that had just unfolded, Agao's impression of Yu had changed significantly. Indeed, even now, in Agao's eyes, Yu was still a trainer who abused Pokemon. Even though he had helped his Accelerus, it still couldn't change his initial impression of Yu. Actually, this couldn't be blamed on Agao and the others. It was because when Yu first released Pikachu to fight, his battered body, not to mention his weakened state, was truly impressive. Thank you, there's no need. Even Metapod wasn't doing this out of respect, nor was it like you were thanking me. I just wanted to say it out of a clear conscience. Yu, however, showed no appreciation at all. He curled his lips, his words sounding righteous and awe-inspiring. Really, you talk a lot of nonsense, you know that? If you want to fight, do it quickly. My time is precious. Chapter 717 Defeat. I won't show any mercy. Even if Ogre helped save Cheetah before, if you want to fight, Then go ahead and talk a lot. Who needs your mercy? Just come on. Ogre can defeat Cheetah even with just one plot twist. Yu waved his hand impatiently. He couldn't believe this person was still blabbering after all the talk he'd said they were going to fight. Then Cheetah, I'll ask you once more. Use Freeze Beam, Ogre, use Water Cannon. After a lot of blabbering, the battle was about to begin. There was no dragging out the previous blabbering. From the moment the battle began, both sides gave it their all. It's not over yet. Critter just rushed forward and used Crab Punch. I won't let you succeed. Ironclad casts Freeze Beam on the ground. Boy, you're still too naive. Critter leaped up and walked on the ice. What? The Freeze Beam, brimming with icy energy, struck the pavement of the cross-sea bridge, instantly forming a thick layer of ice. The battle-hardened Yu and Critter saw through a goose settle plan and immediately countered it with a drastic countermeasure. As the Freeze Beam's effect wore off, Critter landed steadily on the ice. Furthermore, the smooth ice didn't hinder Critter's movements at all. Instead, it made Critter's movements even more agile, like a professional ice skating Pokémon player. Critter's legs were now fully utilized, using all four limbs to maintain balance and adjust the angle of its punches. Under the astonished gaze of Tekka, a powerful crab punch struck Tekka. This time, however, it wasn't the sturdy armor on Tekka's body that struck, but rather its own flesh. The force of the crab punch rebounding from Tekka's exposed flesh even felt soft. After receiving a solid blow from the crab punch, coupled with Tekka's inability to defend itself, Tekka felt incredibly uncomfortable, its face etched with pain. Of course, perhaps due to the psychological trauma of the previous attack, the giant crab controlled its force. Or perhaps it was due to the excessive energy it had previously expended? Although Tekka's crab punch landed squarely on Tekka's body, it didn't send it flying with the dramatic force of the previous one. What a chance! Tekka uses a clamp like that. What? This time, it was Yu who was surprised, his face filled with astonishment. It was truly remarkable that Agao's reaction was so swift this time. Meanwhile, following his trainer's orders, Metagross ignored the pain on his face and quickly used the clamping technique, closing both sides of his fist tightly. Suddenly, the shrew, still feeling the soft sensation of his fist, hadn't even reacted before its massive claws were trapped by Metagross. It was too late to pull out, the shrew was too tightly clamped, and no matter how much Metagross pulled, its massive claws wouldn't budge. So what? I told you to stop wasting your energy and give in. No Pokemon has ever escaped from Metagross's clamping technique. Since you just saved my Metagross, I'll give you one more chance. Amen spoke with a hint of pride, even tossing his rather showy hair with a smug look. Don't be so confident. It's because you haven't met me yet. And you want me to admit defeat? That's impossible. Even if there is such a person, it's definitely not you. After an initial moment of surprise, Yuyu's expression regained its composure. It couldn't be helped. Who can blame him for his strength and confidence? Giant Claw Crab, lift up the ironclad and smash it hard. Giant Claw nodding, bubbles began to form from the Giant Claw Crab's mouth once again. As if only through this method could it gain more confidence and power. At that moment, the Giant Claw Crab's eyes became extremely sharp, and the atmosphere around them changed. Under the gaze of the crowd, the Giant Claw Crab extended its other claw, combining it with a giant claw clamped in the shell. With the two claws working in unison, it slowly lifted the ironclad, weighing an average of 132.5 kilograms. However, as it lifted it back into the air, perhaps because of the sheer weight of the Metagross, or perhaps because it was running low on energy after all the intense experience, the foam from Metagross' mouth grew faster and faster. Even its once white body, visible to the naked eye, was now tinged with a faint pink hue. Yuyu's brow furrowed involuntarily as he saw this. As a trainer, he quickly understood Metagross's current state. With a sigh, he prepared to speak. But before Yuyu could open his mouth, Metagross let out a loud scream, accompanied by two muffled thuds. Looking closely, he saw Metagross, which had been performing a powerful shell-smashing performance, had already collapsed to the ground. Metagross, which it had been holding, had lost its strength and slammed heavily onto Metagross. Perhaps due to its grip, the ironclad couldn't observe what was happening outside. Even though the crab had lost its ability to fight, its tight grip on the shell didn't loosen. Even Yuyu, with his extremely sensitive hearing, could faintly hear the sound of bones cracking. Crab, Yuyu shouted and hurried over. Arriving at the crab, he forcefully pushed the armor away. Without even a glance, Yu pulled his homemade ointment from his storage ring and applied it directly to the crab's body where the sound had come from. After carefully applying the ointment and confirming that the crab had only suffered a simple, ordinary loss of combat power, he breathed a sigh of relief and returned it to its Pokeball. Chapter 718 Rejection. Bang! As Yu put the scorpion back into its Pokeball, the shell of the scorpion, blocked by the scorpion's arms, subconsciously slammed shut. However, after waiting for a long time, realizing that something was wrong, the scorpion carefully opened its shell again. His eyes glanced around warily, fearing that the scorpion would surprise him again. Okay, Scorpion, go back to your Pokemon and ask for a break. Agao also came over at this time, and after praising the scorpion, he also put it back into the Pokeball. After all the Pokemon were put back into the Pokeball, Agao finally looked at Yu with a complicated look. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? I lost this time, and I have nothing to say. But this time, we're in dire straits. Since you won't let us through, could you please take the Pokemon in this Pokeball to the Pokemon Center for treatment? It's in serious condition. Yu grinned helplessly after staring at Agao for a moment. He said nothing, nor did he offer any explanation for the previous incidents. He simply pulled a Pokeball from his belt, looked at Agao sincerely, and handed it over. Oh, right. Since we can't go through, could you please take my incapacitated and injured Pokemon to the Pokemon Center over there so Miss Joy can help with treatment? Without the slightest hesitation, he handed the Pokeball containing Moltres to Agao and then quickly removed several more Pokeballs from his belt, as if to shove them all into Agao's arms for him to help. Of course, Yu finally realized it at this time. Agao and his group looked like colorful dresses, looking like gangster boys. But in fact, they are not bad inside. At least everyone likes Pokemon sincerely. This is why Yu was able to make a series of actions now. If you meet those who are not up to standard. Just kidding, not to mention that Yu would hand over his lifeline Pokemon to others, he would probably even beat him up because he was unhappy. However, despite this, Yu was still very worried. But since you have lost to others, you must at least follow the rules. Although Yu sometimes does things that break the rules, he is actually very reasonable. Yu? Agao looked at Yu in a daze for a moment, not knowing what to say. At this moment, my first impression of Yu began to shake. Forget you, hurry up. The Pokemon in this Pokeball is seriously injured. We can't afford any more delay. You're not known as speedsters, so hurry up and get this Pokemon to the Pokemon Center for treatment as quickly as you can. Take my Pokemon with you, too. Thinking of the urgency of treatment and the sun setting, Yu couldn't bear to see Agao nagging. He glared and shouted, startling everyone around him. But Agao's gaze at Yu was even more complicated. He didn't take the Pokeball Yu offered him, but instead pushed it back. I think you should go. What? What do you mean? Don't you want to? Or are you deliberately trying to make things difficult for us? Yu's words were filled with coldness, his eyes narrowed slightly, exuding a strong sense of danger. What exactly did the other party mean by this? Had he seen it wrong? The other party wasn't someone who cared about Pokemon at all. Otherwise, anyone who did would have accepted this favor without hesitation. And most importantly, because of the promise he'd made during the previous match, if his side lost, he'd have to stay with him. But who knew how long that would last? And if he really insisted on making things difficult for them, staying for a whole day and night, not only Moltres, but all his other Pokemon would probably be dead. While the Cross-Sea Bridge wasn't the only way to get to Big City, it was the shortest way. Damn it. Under normal circumstances, this would have been easier. He could just force his way in. Whatever the rules, the bigger the fist, the better. But now, he only had 1 or 2 Pokemon left that could fight. And they weren't even his main Pokemon, and they weren't very strong. The enemy was now outnumbered, and he would undoubtedly have to protect Serena and the other 2 girls. So, his chances of escaping were estimated to be no more than 30%. It seemed that if all else failed, he would have to break his rules. While he wasn't sure he could defeat a group of Pokemon, he didn't believe that with just his Xiaoguang, he couldn't defeat this group of thugs. Regardless, for Moltres' health and safety, he had to reach the Pokemon Center in Big City before sunset. Agao, sensing the danger and hostility emanating from Yu, especially the flickering aura in his eyes, shuddered. Have you noticed how cold it's suddenly gotten? Now that you mention it, it really makes sense. Oh, my, I think you've been overindulging yourself and feeling a little weak. Just ignore those two, they're so frivolous at such young ages. You know, we're out on the sea, and it's already cold, so wouldn't the wind make it even colder? He could hear the laughter and playfulness of his younger brothers, but as the leader of the group, experiencing this firsthand, Agao couldn't believe the immense pressure he was under. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, dripping down his cheeks like dewdrops. It was back again, that vague sense of danger he'd felt before. Now it was so undisguised and obvious, filling him with an inexplicable fear. Chapter 719 Cold Drink. Gudong swallowing hard, Agao quickly suppressed the uneasiness that was building within him. Though filled with fear, he still had to raise his head and meet those dangerous eyes. No. You, I think you misunderstood. I didn't mean that. Perhaps due to excessive nervousness, Agao's speech was now slurred, stumbling, his gums chattering. Glancing up at the sky, Yu, though filled with anxiety, could not help but subdue his aura after hearing Agao's stammering words. He stared calmly at the youth several years his junior. Although his gaze was silent, lacking the terrifying intensity of earlier, Agao, for some unknown reason, still felt a surge of pressure. It wasn't as overwhelming as before, though, at least now he could hold a normal conversation. Yu, I think you misunderstood me. Although a normal conversation was now possible, Agao didn't dare to hold Yu's gaze for long. He glanced around as he spoke, his words tinged with caution. He was afraid he'd say something wrong again, and the terrifying aura Yu had just exuded would come crashing down on him. He wouldn't be as calm as he was now. He didn't want to embarrass himself in front of his subordinates and his female best friend. What I'm saying is, since you need to take the injured Pokémon to the Pokémon Center, you should go yourself. After all, one thing is better than having to trouble two masters. Agao mustered up the courage to meet Yu's gaze. Yu was a little surprised. What was wrong with that brat? Wasn't he scared to death just now? Now he dared to look him in the eye. And judging by his tone, was he planning to let me go? Yu was pondering the implication of Agao's words. Yu, I understand. I apologize for my previous behavior. I'm sorry. We misunderstood you. Agao, no longer concerned, bowed 90 degrees to Yu under the serious gazes of his fellow disciples. As if emboldened by his words, coupled with Yu's seemingly tacit agreement, Agao no longer cared and simply poured out all the words he had been holding back. I can see it, and from what we just saw, I can also sense your genuine love and care for Pokémon. Otherwise, you wouldn't have just been so reckless, even risking injury in your life, to rescue Cheetah with Scylla. And don't underestimate my limited knowledge of Pokémon. That's simply because I don't like studying and skip classes every day to go racing. But it's also because I've been exposed to society early on that I've gained a deeper understanding of all kinds of people, especially through their actions. I can better understand their personalities. The more he spoke, the more embarrassed he became. To mask his embarrassment, he kept rubbing his nose, even his eyes becoming a bit evasive. He looked like an elementary school student who didn't do well on a test and was afraid of being scolded by his parents. After all, Yu had just taunted Agi about Melodic's mystical guardian. But to Agao, that was clearly a reprimand from an elder. Yu also felt a little amused after seeing this scene, but he remained impassive. He could tell that Agao had more to say, and if the above reasons alone weren't enough to make Yu relax. Sure enough, after his initial awkwardness, Agao quickly regained his composure. Although he still felt a tinge of embarrassment, after thinking about Yu's previous actions, he felt a surge of courage. Also, strictly speaking, we lost both of those Pokémon battles. After some initial hesitation, Agao finally spoke his true thoughts. However, as soon as he said this, the group of followers around him suddenly became anxious. Boss, what were you doing in Huzhou? We clearly won the last two matches. That's right, boss. You and Big Sister both defeated his Pokémon, boss. We understand your gratitude for saving your Pokémon, but a game is a game. There's no such thing as real or fake. The most important thing is the result. We all saw it. Po is right, boss. He said that Pokémon battles are all about a final result. Besides, we just explained the rules. Only if they defeat us can they go. Otherwise, they have to stay with us. They promised it themselves. He had never expected that he had just started. His words were like stirring up a hornet's nest. His subordinates were even more anxious than he was, their emotions boiling as if they were about to attack him. Although Agao had expected this, He was still a little surprised when he saw it. Compared to the excited younger brothers, however, Eiji, the big sister, remained much calmer. She leaned against her bicycle, leisurely sipping from a bottle of drink. However, a thoughtful look played over her gaze towards Yu. "Shut up, everyone," as if annoyed by the noise, Agao finally erupted, displaying the authority and imposing manner expected of a leader, barking in a cold, direct voice. The moment her voice erupted, the previously noisy atmosphere suddenly quieted. Agao, now wary of Yu, showed no sign of her earlier cautious demeanor. This was the aura of a gang leader who often skipped classes and hung out. Yu couldn't help but glance sideways, his lips curling slightly, his hands folded across his chest, as if he were watching the show with indifference. Chapter 720, Sudden Regret and Reluctance. Shut up, all of you. We may be a gang of young racers, but in the eyes of others, we're more of thugs. But even though we're thugs, we're also the most reasonable of thugs. For us Pokemon trainers, Pokemon battles are sacred. Moreover, Pokemon battles are inherently about fairness and justice. That's what we learned in school. Agao's initial words were passionate, and one could feel his blood boiling. But as he spoke further, he felt a sense of shame. At this point, many of the thugs began to agree, and the initial silence became noisy again, with voices echoing one after another. "Boss, you actually said Pokemon battles are about fairness and justice. But didn't we win the battle just now?" Yeah, then why do you keep saying that? Why should they leave now? They have to stay and race with us." The arguments that had just subsided for a moment now flared up again. This time, however, Agao didn't shout out to stop his minions' chatter as he had last time. Instead, he continued to chatter, as if he hadn't heard what they were saying. But with each word, the bitterness on his face grew more and more intense. "I know, at first, both Eiji and I should have lost to you. But it was your reminders, even your concessions, that allowed us to narrowly win the match. From Eiji's confusion at the beginning due to the negative effects on melodic skills, to the subsequent reminders from the girl next to you, it was only then that the situation was gradually reversed. And I think you tacitly approved this girl's actions. Without your actions, even if your Pikachu is so weak, Melodic's defeat would have been inevitable after such a relentless pursuit." At this point, as if to save Eiji's face, Agao paused, though he glanced in Eiji's direction with a hint of embarrassment. But despite her reserved nature, Eiji was actually quite open and honest. Or perhaps he's completely single. He exchanged a glance with Agao, chuckling softly before continuing. "At first, I also felt very strange. I felt like winning this match was so incredible. So fantastical. Now, after Agao's reminder, I realize my victory was indeed somewhat unfair." Eiji admitted the unfairness of the match for Yu, though he wore a nonchalant smile. But Yu could inexplicably discern the bitterness and resentment lingering in his smile, a tinge of regret. "How he honestly, before today, I never thought I'd regret not studying hard enough in school. But now I do have a tinge of regret. Regarding the skill Mean Xiao's mystic art, I suddenly remembered how many times my teacher had taught me about it in class, but I'd immediately forgotten it." Eiji, Agao's emotions were now mixed. Not only the group of younger brothers around him, but they were also silent, no longer as excited as before. The truth was, they all originally attended the same school, some even in the same class and grade. It was simply their rebellious nature that made them unable to bear the tedium of school. This led to the young racers on the Cross-Sea Bridge. They saw it as better to let loose and cheer on the wide, open bridge than to remain stuck in the drudgery of school. The thrill of racing, the tension of competing, and the reckless passion of youth. Under the setting sun, they could let their worries drift away on their bikes. Yu was unsure how to comfort them. As a senior who had long since left home to travel, he felt he should say something. But he had never attended a Pokemon school, so he was at a loss for words. Although he had attended school before, it was only for 9 years of compulsory education, where the curriculum was limited to the usual academic subjects. As for his own Pokemon skills, they were all learned from Professor Oak, a renowned Pokemon expert in Kanto and even the entire island nation. Just kidding. Unless someone is unwilling to learn, Professor Oak can likely train anyone willing to learn, no matter how limited their abilities. You see, Professor Oak is not only a renowned Pokemon expert, but also a renowned Pokemon trainer. He once practically dominated the entire Kanto region in the Pokemon League Championship. This is why Zhao Kuang sent Yu, who is extremely passionate about Pokemon, to him. And this is why Lizuner and Chen Kailin, the two girls who originally came to Yu, are now learning Pokemon knowledge under Professor Oak's guidance. After all, apart from their family ties, they are truly just ordinary little girls. If there's any difference, it's that they possess martial arts skills. Even so, their personalities mirror Yu's. If it weren't for family matters, Chen Kailin and Lizuner would have agreed long ago that as soon as they reached adulthood, they would travel the world with Yu. While it was a little later than expected, it wasn't too late. Therefore, Lizuner and Chen Kailin were eager to catch up on all the knowledge they had missed. I know you all love actual Pokemon battles. You find theoretical knowledge about Pokemon boring and tedious, and you don't like to learn it. But Pokemon battles are based on a solid theoretical foundation. Yu chuckled softly at the hooligans who lowered their heads in thought, even a few with regretful expressions on their faces. Pokemon battles aren't just battles between Pokemon, they're also training in battles between trainers. As for battles between Pokemon trainers, what are they? Of course, the rest is just theory, a clash of theories. Chapter 721 Emotions and Fighting. Pokemon battles aren't just about Pokemon fighting each other, they're also about training and fighting between trainers. As for battles between Pokemon trainers, what are they? Of course, all that's left is theory, a clash of theories. Even if you possess sample Pokemon knowledge, if you encounter an evenly matched opponent and become locked in a protracted battle, all you'll have to rely on is the Pokemon theory you learned in school. Yu, surrounded by the thugs who had surrounded him and his companions, spoke with a profound earnestness, the tone of someone who had experienced it. But what Yu said was true. After all, in the Pokemon world, besides sheer overwhelming power, tactics are crucial. Otherwise, why would Pokemon have Pokemon trainers? Are they just supposed to be poop scoopers? Then, in so-called battles, it's all just Pokemon fighting Pokemon. This situation does exist, however, and it's the conflicts that arise between Pokemon before they've even been captured by their trainers. Back then, Pokemon were generally on equal terms. None of them had a trainer to guide them, relying solely on their own strength and wisdom. In general, being a Pokemon trainer isn't as simple as one might imagine. To be a good and competent Pokemon trainer, a love for the flagged Pokemon is far from enough. One must also possess sufficient knowledge to fight alongside the Pokemon and even understand more about them. Only then can one be considered a qualified Pokemon trainer. Recalling the days when he studied Pokemon with Professor Oak, Yu couldn't help but smile, his words drifting back to Professor Oak's loving guidance. He never imagined that, so soon, he would actually be able to teach others. In fact, through studying with Professor Oak, Yu had met many renowned Pokemon professors from the island nation, and his theoretical knowledge was immense. Barring a few special requirements, it's no exaggeration to say that Yu now possesses the qualifications to qualify as a Pokemon professor. But what he ultimately pursued was the thrilling battles between Pokemon, and he had absolutely no interest in the dull, tedious world of academic research. Yu, I understand. Thank you. Starting now, we will return to school and study diligently. I invite you to challenge me to duel then. Yu seemed to have just realized what was happening, scratching his head in bewilderment. What was he talking about? He himself disliked studying, yet he was actually trying to persuade others to study on their own. He shook his head helplessly and gave a wry smile. However, facing a challenge initiated by someone else, even though it was a scheduled one, Yu had no reason to refuse. Well, I'm looking forward to fighting you then. I hope you'll impress me. I will, Egu replied with unprecedented conviction. Hey, boss, now is not the time for sentimentality. You're talking too much about this topic. Yeah, boss, weren't we just talking about the outcome of your battle? Okay, I admit you mentioned that about Big Sister AG, but this only makes it a 1-1 tie. Yeah. Although we deeply admire you right now, the rules are the rules. At this point, some of the younger brothers finally caught on to their conversation, though their words lacked the previous aggressiveness and malice. Instead, they were simply filled with curiosity and excitement about the battle. Indeed, at that moment, an inexplicable emotion surged through them. It was a thirst for Pokemon battles. Now, this group of young thugs no longer held any hostility towards Yu. They were still saying this because they wanted to see Yu's next battle with the others. After all, Yu's sudden change in image was truly a huge shock to them. At one point, they even felt like they were watching their idols. Now, They just wanted to watch one more battle between Yu and their companions and gain more from it. Well, the reason why I can't be considered defeated by Yu is entirely because if it weren't for the fact that the giant crab tried its best to save my armored oyster and consumed too much energy, then it would still be my armored oyster that would be defeated in the end. After all, even though my armored oyster was always on the defensive and didn't consume much energy, in fact, it was actually broken by the giant crab long ago. It was just that one final blow, but in the final battle, I could see that the giant crab was exhausted because of it. When he said this, Gao no longer had the initial frustration at first, but instead, a hint of gold glint flashed in his eyes. And let's put it bluntly. Even if Arceus had been blasted into the sea by Scylla, the outcome would have been decided. And the other side wouldn't have been held responsible. After all, it was us who initiated the Pokemon battle. Yu and Scylla, thank you. If it weren't for you, Arceus would have been finished. Egu, besides inexplicable admiration for Yu, was filled with gratitude in both his words and his expression. Alright. Man, don't be so sentimental. Honestly, if I weren't so pressed for time this time, I would have accepted all of your challenges. Yu also felt a little regretful. After all, he was a battle fanatic, and his greatest desire was to engage in Pokemon battles with others. Although the other side's strength didn't seem that great judging by their leader's condition, even a mosquito leg was still meat. If all else failed, they could just attack together and we could just keep fighting them all. He thought so, but then he reflected on his current situation. Yu sighed once more for no apparent reason. And today isn't a good day. My Pokemon were all injured in the previous battle. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 722 Environment. Well, that puts it this way. Yu, the Pikachu you mentioned earlier, was in an injured state. Even though Gao already knew Yu's Pokemon was incredibly powerful, he couldn't help but gasp. That makes my victory even more unfair. While I certainly had a little bit of a hand in that, an injured Pikachu can actually rival me. Oh my god, how powerful was Pikachu in its prime? Even with all that Gao had just said, AG remained remarkably calm, as if it had nothing to do with him. She simply listened quietly, like an outsider. But at this moment, AG's composure vanished. She let out a high-pitched scream, then, as if she had thought of something incredible, her exclamations grew louder and louder. Haha, low-key, isn't that exaggerated, is it, AG? Now, like a little fangirl, covered her cheeks with her hands, staring at him with a starry face. Yu, for once, felt a little embarrassed. He offered a shy smile and held out his hand, feigning indifference. What's wrong with you, that damned jerk? Where's that swagger from just now? How could you be so sullen in the face of a girl like that? That jerk is so disgusting. He looked at that girl with such lecherous eyes. Are the three of us put together less pretty than that girl? I'm so pissed. The three women, Serena and the others, standing behind Yu, were so furious at seeing Yu's behavior that their faces flushed red, their faces aching to capture him, imprison him in their little room, and do unspeakable things to him. Yu, of course, had heard the conversation behind him, and beads of cold sweat dripped down his forehead. But thinking of the consequences of responding, he pretended not to hear and continued his awkward conversation with the man and woman in front of him. Yu, instead of wasting time on awkward conversation with the other girls, you should rush Moltres and the others to the Pokemon Center for treatment. Yeah, I wonder why someone was so anxious just now? He's just chatting with a girl and forgets about the whole thing. Seeing Yu didn't respond, or even glance at them, Serena and the others, even with their best tempers, couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. Each of them was a bit sarcastic. But compared to Serena and Ayer, who were acting like a double act, Xiaoxu was much gentler. She slowly walked over and tugged at Yu's shirt from behind. Yu, as if remembering something, slapped his forehead, a little annoyed. Yeah, there's more important things to do now. Now that the misunderstanding has been resolved and you're not blocking our way, we'll be leaving. Hastily clipping the Pokeball he still held onto the Pokemon belt around his waist, Yu quickly got back on his bike. Upon seeing this, Serena and the others didn't hesitate, skillfully scrambling back onto their bikes. Seeing Yu and his group about to ride off, Gao, seemingly reacting, practically shouted out. Wait a moment, please, huh? What's the matter? Do you have anything else to say? Yu paused the bike he'd just pedaled, asking in confusion, his brows furrowed involuntarily. Don't take it the wrong way, we don't mean any harm. We're just terribly ashamed of our previous actions, so we're willing to help. As if afraid of being misunderstood, a guy waved his hands, feeling a little embarrassed but still speaking directly. Oh. It's okay, we're fine. You guys should just continue racing or finish your studies. His brows relaxed slightly, and Yu simply waved his hand. After saying this, he rode his bike forward. Serena and the other two followed closely behind Yu. It seemed that the events of the past had delayed the time Yu had anticipated. He no longer had the leisurely, unhurried mood he'd initially been enjoying, admiring the scenery. He was now in a rush, even standing upright and pedaling furiously, stirring up a fierce gust of wind. But the weather wasn't kind, as if fate was playing along with him. Or perhaps it was like a novel, where the protagonist has to overcome numerous difficulties and obstacles before reaching the ultimate goal. The sky, which had initially been clear, had suddenly become overcast. The sky was completely dark, not a single ray of light filtering through. In such an atmosphere, one could not help but feel a sense of oppression. Fortunately, the cross-sea bridge was well equipped, with streetlights every 2 or 3 meters providing illumination. A gentle, Herculean rain had begun to fall. Tick tick tick. The rain started out light, but gradually grew heavier. Raindrops rhythmically pelted the crowd on the cross-sea bridge. Some people who had reached old age early were quite shrewd. Someone carrying a water bottle and an umbrella was carrying a bloody umbrella. Some experienced travelers even pulled their raincoat from their backpacks and draped it over their bodies. However, facing the downpour, Yu couldn't care less. The steady pounding of the rain had already drenched him like a drowned rat. Even so, because he pedaled so fast, the relentless raindrops lashed his face, making it hard to tell whether it was rain or sweat. The wound on his calf, previously bandaged and not bleeding, now oozed blood, mixing with the raindrops that fell on his trouser legs. Chapter 723 Pikachu's Stubbornness. Faster, faster, as if oblivious to the relentless pelting of the rain, Yu, far from letting the water on his face blur his vision, slowed down his bike, even accelerating. And Yu wasn't the only one pushing himself so hard. Following closely behind him in a triangular formation, the 3 Serena girls made no effort to stop and retrieve the rain gear they had brought from their backpacks. Their bikes didn't slow down, but even sped up considerably. Even as the rain intensified, the 3 Serena girls tried to retrieve the Pokémon still in their baskets, but were rejected one by the fiery fox. The rain intensified, and from time to time, a flash of lightning streaked across the sky, seemingly ripping a bright slit through the darkness. Those streaks of lightning even illuminated a path ahead. Even though the cross-sea bridge was illuminated by streetlights, the rainy, overcast sky made the road barely visible. Lightning also illuminated the crowd, revealing their expressions. Yu, charging forward, pedaling furiously, his face etched with anxiety and a hint of anger, a dark hue. If it weren't for the interrupting sound of rain, or the occasional deafening roar of thunder, Yu's words would have been clearly audible. Why? Because Yu was now shouting, "Damn it! Pikachu! Stop being so stubborn! Get in your Pokeball." It turned out that in the previous battle, after Yu surrendered, he hadn't included Pikachu in his Pokeball. It wasn't that Yu didn't want to, but perhaps because he had surrendered, Pikachu still had some feelings, and was therefore very reluctant to enter his Pokeball. So, from the very beginning, Yu had placed Pikachu in the basket of his bicycle to rest. But he hadn't expected the weather to be as unpredictable as a woman's. The sky, previously clear and sunny, suddenly began to pour. The rain intensified, accompanied not only by lightning and thunder, but also by powerful gusts of wind that blew continuously toward them. It was as if God was pleased to make their path even more difficult. If Pikachu were in peak condition, or even healthy, Yu wouldn't have shown such anxiety even after just a few moments of rain, let alone the combination of his supposedly brutal training. It was simply because Pikachu is so weak. His injuries hadn't healed yet, and the intense battle had only exacerbated his condition. He looked as if he could perish at any moment in the torrential downpour. But honestly, if it weren't for Pikachu's last bit of stubbornness keeping him going, Yu wouldn't be so panicked right now. Pikachu. Despite his trainer's persistent pleas, Pikachu remained stubborn. He didn't like being confined to small spaces. He preferred being out in the vast world, seeing its diverse landscapes, staying by his trainer's side. He faced every difficulty and challenge with his trainer. So, even at this moment, when he was utterly weak, he didn't want to leave his trainer, even if it meant staying inside his Pokeball. Forcing himself to keep his drooping eyelids open, Pikachu shook his head weakly. His eyes fixed on Yu. The sound of someone pedaling a bicycle forward, even amidst a torrential downpour, thunder and lightning, and a fierce wind, couldn't stop his determined heart from moving forward. Seeing the expression on his trainer's face, Pikachu couldn't help but let out a silly grin as he lay on the basket. Although Yu, concentrating on riding his bike forward, didn't look at Pikachu, lying in the basket, he could still feel its gaze. This only made Yu even more irritated. He no longer looked at the road, but instead stared down at Pikachu fiercely. "What are you looking at, you little brat? Get back to your Pokeball and rest. I'll get you to the Pokemon Center soon." Despite his harsh tone, Yu couldn't hide the concern in his words. Pikachu seemed truly exhausted. Under the relentless wind and rain, his pointed ears, once erect, drooped weakly on his head. He let out a few weak cries at Yu. Seeing Pikachu so weakened, Yu felt a pang of heartache. But Pikachu was incredibly stubborn, insisting on putting it back into its Pokeball to avoid the rain and a worsening cold. But Pikachu kept resisting, having already taken out his Pokeball several times to try and put it back in. But he never imagined that even in his weakened state, Pikachu could still break free with a little play. It was fine once or twice, but after so many attempts, Yu was at his wit's end. "I'm so pissed off, so pissed off. After you recover, I'll train you to death," Yu threatened fiercely. But while his words spoke, his body was true. A sharp, slightly piercing sound of brakes suddenly rang out. Then, Yu, who had been charging forward, pedaling furiously, suddenly stopped. Serena and the other two, following closely behind, saw this and thought something had happened. They hurriedly exerted all their strength, using all their strength to ride their bicycles and quickly catch up. Because of the high speed, the three fire attribute Pokemon on their bicycles couldn't help but shrink their bodies. Chapter 724 Prayer. Even the three fire-type Pokemon on their bikes involuntarily huddled up, due to the momentary speed. "What happened, Yu? Why did you stop? What's wrong with you?" The three women followed closely behind, stopping their bikes beside Yu and asking him questions with concern, their faces filled with worry. "Oh, it's nothing, it's just that Pikachu is just too bad. He's already so weak, and we told him to return to his Pokeball, but he can't." Upon hearing the three women's questions, Yu began to fuss as he made his gestures, his tone involuntarily becoming a little venomous. Yu couldn't think much more at this point. Having lived in the Chinese martial arts world since childhood, he was deeply influenced by Chinese culture. Apart from certain times and places, he mostly wore hanfu, Chinese traditional clothing. The rain was pouring down, soaking his robes. As a formidable warrior himself, Yu wasn't bothered by the rain. Pikachu, however, was stubbornly refusing to return to its Pokeball. Coupled with the prolonged rain, Yu was becoming increasingly anxious. He had no choice but to stop his speeding bicycle and lift Pikachu out of the basket. However, because he was wearing a warrior robe, similar to traditional Chinese clothing, Yu couldn't remove it to wrap Pikachu like he normally would. Therefore, he could only hold the now drenched Pikachu in his arms. "Oh my god, it's so cold, that brat, Pikachu, you're still saying you're fine. He's already freezing. If anything happens, I'll hang him up and give him a beating." After placing Pikachu in his robe, even Yu, despite his formidable physique, gasped. Pikachu, as if still conscious, Pikachu let out a dazed cry after hearing Yu's harsh words. It seemed only that it was sensing its own chill. Suddenly, warmth filled the surroundings, and Pikachu's little body arched in Yu's embrace. "This brat is enjoying himself now. Sigh, I don't know what he's thinking. The Pokeball is so much warmer than my arms." At this point, what else could Yu say? He could only sigh helplessly. Once again, reassurance that Pikachu was alright eased his previously tense nerves. "Yu, why don't you let me take care of Pikachu?" Yeah, it's probably going to be inconvenient for you to ride like this." Serena and couldn't help but remark upon seeing this. After traveling together for so long, the girls knew Pikachu's nature was just that, he didn't like being confined to small, confined spaces. Yu glanced at the girls with a strange look in his eyes, especially pausing for a moment before sweeping across them. But then he chuckled and shook his head. Forget it, I don't think it's too inconvenient for you. And let me take care of Pikachu. After all, I'm its trainer. Following the spot where Yuyu's gaze had lingered, Serena and the others finally realized what was happening. Even though it was raining, and they were in a hurry and didn't have time to change into rain gear, the three girls looked particularly disheveled. But it still couldn't hide their pretty faces, and their faces, which had been a little pale from the rain, were now slightly flushed with shyness. Okay, you don't have to rush. Just leave everything to me, take your time, don't rush. And you girls are weak, so hurry up and take out your rain gear to keep out the rain, otherwise you might catch a cold. She wiped the rain off her face and tied up her hair, which was a little messy because it was wet, so that it would not block her vision. Only then did you have time to smile and say to the three girls, "No need. We are all partners, we will advance and retreat together. Besides, we have been traveling for so long, we have gained a lot. I mean, you underestimate us too much? We are not delicate princesses, just let us go together. One more person means more strength. And this way we will feel more at ease." Only then did Serena and the others have time to start sorting out some things on their faces and heads. In that case, remember to tell me when you feel exhausted or unwell. Or if you really can't hold on any longer, you can stop and rest. Yu was still a little worried. After giving him one more reminder, he hurriedly stepped on the pedals and pushed forward. Seeing this, Air and the others hurried to catch up. They were afraid that if they were even a little slower, they would never catch up with Yu. However, before Yu could ride far, they heard a sudden noise from behind. Ding ding ding, a slightly noisy sound rang out behind them. Even though it was pouring rain and there were occasional thunder, it still couldn't cover up their voices. Because the noise behind them was too loud, in addition to the sound of bicycle bells. From time to time, cheers could be heard. Even more exaggerated, you could faintly hear the DJ playing on the speakers. Because they were in such a hurry, even the noise behind them was heard. Yu and the others didn't have time to look back at this time. They could only pedal their bicycles and rush forward quickly. Damn it, what's going on? I hope no more trouble will come to me, otherwise I will be too unlucky. I haven't been quiet since I woke up all day. Especially since I just took an injured Pokemon to the Pokemon Center for treatment. As for making it like the journey to the west in a certain novel, I have to go through 81 difficulties before I will give up. Arceus, ho-oh, Pokia. Bless me that everything will go smoothly on the rest of my journey. Yu complained madly in his heart helplessly, but at the same time he had to pray silently in his heart. But there is a saying after all. If it is a blessing, it will not be a disaster, and if it is a disaster, it will not be avoided. Chapter 725 Hero. The less he thought about it, the more it seemed to be coming. Yu knew he couldn't afford to waste any more time. If the trouble caused by the noise behind him were to come back to them, the Pokemon would be in grave danger. Therefore, after thinking this, Yu pedaled even faster. Serena and the other two girls behind him also sped up, following closely behind him. While this would normally be considered extreme pedaling speed, it did seem a bit slow to the group behind him. Ding ding ding, a series of rapid bicycle bells rang out, breaking the heavy atmosphere of the rainy night. Because of the rain and the gloomy weather, even though the cross-sea bridge was illuminated by streetlights, Air still had to ride a bicycle. Even if she suddenly turned back to see what was happening behind her, she was blocked by the rain. Raindrops fell like pearls, creating a thud-thud sound as they landed, while others rustled under the strong wind. Air couldn't see clearly at first, facing the noise behind her and the people approaching so quickly. Anxious, she hurried even faster. In a matter of moments, she had caught up with Air, who was riding so fast. A hint of panic crossed her face, and she tilted her head slightly to look at Yu, who was focused on riding his bicycle, staring straight ahead as if nothing happened behind him. She asked, "Yu, what should we do? There seems to be a group coming from behind. They look like they're up to no good, what else can we do? Ignore them. Let's get on with our bikes and get out of this dangerous place." Yu was feeling extremely irritated. He had experienced too much that day. His Pokemon were in such dire straits, he had no time to worry about anything else, so his tone was a little harsh. Air was stunned by Yu's sudden tone. All she could do was pedal her bike subconsciously. As if sensing something, Yu realized something was wrong with Air and immediately felt a surge of regret. What had happened to him? No matter how anxious or uneasy he felt, he shouldn't have lost his temper with Air. But considering he was in a hurry, Yu didn't stop to comfort Air. He could only shout as he rode. Air, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have lost my temper with you. It's just that the situation is too tense right now. I'll apologize to you later. As they spoke, the noise behind them grew closer. Yu could even clearly make out that it was a convoy of cyclists, similar to the so-called youth racing gang he had seen earlier. No way, who could be out in the rain? Wouldn't it be nice to just stay home? You're still wandering around in this weather, and judging by the way you look, you're probably not going to catch us this morning. Yu couldn't help but quicken his pace. With his formidable physique, he could practically pedal like a roller coaster. The strange thing was, even at that speed, the cyclists behind him were closing in on him. Hey, Yu, why are you guys riding so fast? Don't you even wait for us? A familiar voice suddenly rang out in Yu's ears. Turning, he saw Agu had caught up, riding his impressive bike. If our bikes hadn't been modified with a little propulsion, we'd be left far behind, another familiar female voice echoed from the other side. Turning, he saw Aji doing the same. What are you all doing? I can only say, your hobbies are truly persistent. You're riding your bikes across the fast bridge in this downpour, even without an umbrella. Seeing the two people beside him catch up, Yu couldn't help but twitch his lips. Because at this moment, compared to their group, Agu and the others looked even more miserable. Little did they know, Yu and the others weren't much better off. They were all soaked to the skin. Look at what you're saying. We young racers don't just have passionate hearts, we're all Pokemon trainers, Agu retorted upon hearing Yu's words. Meanwhile, AG, on his other side, took over. If you're a Pokemon trainer, what does it mean to be a Pokemon trainer? Of course, it's a passionate young man who's not afraid of any difficulty and dares to take on any challenge. It was amazing how powerful AG's words really were. That's exactly what I mean, Agu laughed heartily, clearly in a very good mood. Finally, he continued, besides, didn't you just say you wanted to take the injured Pokemon to the Pokemon Center for treatment? So, how can we not help? Even though we look like this, we all love Pokemon. So, let's help too. Let's do our bit, even if it's just something as simple as accompanying them. Yu was stunned. Was this the same Aga they met at the beginning? Yu turned around, looking unsure. Aga was unusually embarrassed, controlling the bicycle with one hand while rubbing his nose with the other. That's pretty much it. Besides, being a hero can't just be left to you. Everyone, don't you agree? Yes, yes, yes. As Aga's shouts rang out, echoes echoed from all around them. At this moment, the figures finally seemed to truly emerge. With Yu, Xiaozu and the other two girls as the center, bicycles began to drive around them, completely surrounding them. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.